Right, I'm going to call to order a special meeting of the Planning Commission. Phyllis, I'll go slowly as Anthony gets seated. Can we get roll call, please?
Sure. Chairperson Bob McCool.
Here.
Vice Chairperson Lisa Ritchie.
Here.
Commissioners Phyllis Harden here. David Harper. Here. Jerry Malia.
Here.
Ben Miller.
Here.
Jason Reese.
Here.
Anthony Stewart.
Here.
Steve Whitty.
Here.
Planner Stephen Williams.
Here.
Attorney Dan Harvey.
Here. Okay, excellent. Kind of meant for now time for public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. So we do have a public hearing tonight, but if there are any items that are not on the agenda that the public would like to comment on before we get started, now is the time. No hands going up, so we'll continue on. Consent agenda tonight consists of the minutes from the August 20th, 2019 and the August 28th, 2019 meetings, and I'll entertain a motion to approve. Can we do them both in one shot here? Does that sound fine? Okay. Who was here? And let's just, you weren't here for which one? Okay. All right. So let's start with the 821 motion to approve.
820.
I'll make a motion to approve minutes for August 20th. We have a second. I second. Commissioner Malia, second. Okay. And all in favor? Opposed? None. Abstained? One. Or not here? One, right?
5.
And Anthony wasn't. Who?
Commissioner Reese. Miller.
You are not here.
So 3. Okay. Okay.
All right. Motion for the August 28th minutes. All right. We have a Commissioner Harper moved to approve. A second. Commissioner Miller. And all in favor? Opposed?
2.
2 not here. Okay.
Whitty and Reese. Okay.
All right. Just before I open the public hearing, just to sort of set, this is a big application that we're going to be talking about this evening. So I'm going to sort of set a check-in at about 9:30. I'm guessing unless somehow this magically goes really fast, but it's going to set a check-in for around 9:30. We just sort of have an inclination this will probably go till next week. Does that sound okay timing-wise? If we're in a good place, we want to go till 10 or decide at that time to go longer, we can, or we can continue the hearing if that makes sense. Does that work for everybody? Then if it does end up needing to be continued, we talked about next Tuesday, I think, and was 6 o'clock a consideration? Do you want me to check with the commission?
We can do 6 o'clock if that's.
We're wondering if that would work for commissioners to do 6. That is outside of our normal time, but.
I might not be able to make next Tuesday.
At all?
Yeah.
Okay, so 6 wouldn't matter if you can't make it, okay. Okay, all right. Okay, so just for those. That's November 5th. November, what did I, yeah, November the 5th. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah. Okay. All right. Sounds good. We ready? I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. All right, we've got a public hearing to review and comment on a request for a final subdivision plat for blocks 2 and 4 through 11, tracks A and B, and surrounding streets within the Superior Town Center, downtown Superior. A final development plan for both horizontal street and infrastructure improvements for portions of Creek View Way, Marshall Road, Old Railway, and Gateway Drive. And final development plan for the vertical development of blocks 4, 6, 7, 9, 10, and 11, and parcel K, which includes the downtown plaza and pedestrian promenade. Public hearing is open. We have a staff, so we have proof of publications.
Yes,
Thanks, I need to look at my notes, sorry. Right, and then, all right, staff presentation.
Yeah, good evening, Stephen Williams, town staff. I guess I'm suggesting, or I've got this formatted to kind of give you an initial cut at the presentation, a broad overview of what they're proposing, and then turn it over to Chase to show you the 3D model, and then turn it over to the applicant to give their presentation, and then we can dive in deeper to, different details within the application, but mostly to give myself a break from talking and give you guys a break from hearing from me. We'll start with kind of the initial broad view. So As stated, tonight's development application involves a subdivision plat and 2 final development plans. The subdivision plat will create or adjust the boundaries of Block 2 as well as Blocks 4 through 11, so 9 blocks in total, as well as Tracks A and B and the surrounding rights-of-way. The applicant is also proposing 2 separate development applications, one for horizontal improvements involving certain streets and infrastructure, generally illustrated in the map in the center. And then finally, one for vertical development of 6 blocks, blocks 4, 6, 7, and 9 through 11, as well as parcel K, which is generally reflected on the right. As stated, Chase Mullen, our imaging consultant, is here to walk you through the 3D model, and Bill Jenks of RC Superior and Ryan Morgan of Morgan Holdings are also in attendance tonight with their consultant team. They'll have a presentation of their own. The vicinity map here is for the plat. The subdivision plat involves nearly 50 acres, which are highlighted in red. This area primarily involves planning area 2, but both tracks A and track B are located within planning area 1, are also included. And they're included because the southern boundaries of each of these tracks, which contain parks 1 and 2, are being established or adjusted through this plat in order to create the alignment for the right-of-way to the south, which is Creekview Way. And these illustrations help to distinguish the plat acreage from the areas involved with the 2 final development plans. The 50 acres associated with the plat is illustrated on the left. The blocks highlighted in red on the right are proposed for development. As illustrated, neither Tract A or Tract B are highlighted, nor is development proposed currently for blocks 2, 5, or 8. And the segments of Gateway Drive here and Creekview Drive are also being platted, but not proposed for development at this time. As detailed in the associated staff memos, the 3 applications are related and need to be evaluated together to understand all of the issues involved. The presentation will begin with a quick overview of the plat proposal before getting into the details of the development applications. The staff memo on the plat included this table to help clarify how the proposed subdivision compares with the PD projections that were for the acreages involved in the blocks, for the blocks involved. Columns include PD acreage on the kind of the second column on the left, currently platted acreage and proposed platted acreage. As illustrated, the subdivision largely conforms to the PD, where block acreage is changed by more than 1/10 of an acre. Those areas are highlighted. The most substantial changes involve Block 4 and Block K, which will be explained shortly. Moving down the table, Block 7 is proposed to be divided differently, but involves a comparable amount of acreage. So it's 3.25 total within the PD, and at the within the 3 lots within Block 7, it's just over 3.3 acres. Tract A is actually enlarging slightly as the alignment of Creekview Way is shifting south from what was projected in the plan development. And then Tract B is reflected, if you look at the PD column versus the proposed column, as nearly 2 acres smaller, but most of this change already occurred and has been platted that way, and that is attributable to partly to Tract C1, which has been separated from Tract B already, and that was to create a detention facility that's always been planned for that area, which is just north of the parking garage, the existing parking garage and medical office building. And then Block 4 is no longer proposed to include the parking area that was illustrated in the PD, and we'll get to that right now. Oh, somehow the map dropped, but the PD map, which should be right here, reflects this area, and it's kind of shown right in here, but it reflects this area as part of this area here as parking, but it was actually part of Tract B1, so sorry that somehow dropped out. But essentially that's the biggest thing that's attributing to the change in acreage within Block 4 is the inclusion of the parking area. One of these issues that staff identified as needing both additional clarification from the applicant as well as direction from PC involves public versus private areas in general. Within the Morgan Ranch and shared parking proposal, the areas of certain public parking are currently limited to, the areas of like certain guaranteed public parking are currently limited to on-street parking. The applicant has identified shared parking areas within private property, but the plat would need to provide public access easement for these to be accessible and to ensure that the public has access to this use. And so that's a change that staff is suggesting, is that we get access easements over those areas that have been listed as shared parking. Staff is seeking direction from PC on this issue for the whole area, as well as Block 4 in particular, given its adjacency to Parks 1 and 2. The proposed reduction in size of Parcel K, illustrated on the right, is basically attributable to two primary factors. One is the inclusion of Block 3 within Lot 7, which is down in this southeast corner. You don't see that in the PD, but that's proposed now. And then it's also due to the narrowing of the promenade, which in their application was proposed to narrow from 45 feet down to 28 feet. Staff's memo identified concerns about the narrowing of the promenade, as well as the distinction between private and public realms. The area where Lot 3 is proposed is considered developable in the PD. It's been given a 25-foot massing allowance. So this request really for that block relates more to ownership and whether this area should remain part of Parcel K or can develop separately with separate ownership. Oh, I don't know why it floated in, but there it is. So you can see the parking area here that's previously was included within Tract B, and now it's included within the block that's proposed for the restaurant parcel on Block 4. The plat would create the blocks and lots and right-of-ways shown here. The proposal involves 9 blocks, Olive Creekview Way and Gateway Drive, in addition to segments of Marshall Road and Old Railway. The existing roads within Planning Area 2 are illustrated here in gray. The roads that will be built are highlighted in red. And the segments of Creekview Way and Gateway Drive that would be platted through this application but not constructed are reflected in blue. The blocks proposed for development are labeled as illustrated. Morgan Ranch is proposing to build all the public streets around all of the blocks that are proposed for development. The segments of right-of-way shown in blue will be completed when development for blocks 2 and 5 come in for applications. The illustration also clarifies how individual blocks involved are proposed to be divided. No internal lots are proposed for Block 4 or Block 6. So Block 4 is here, Block 6 is here. Block 7 is proposed to include 3 lots. Parcel K is proposed to separate both Block 6 and Block 7, and it also separates Lot 2 and Lot 3 within Block 7. Blocks 9 through 11 south of Main Street are divided into multiple lots, as you can see, 28 lots, 20 and 19 respectively. These blocks are more consistent with the development blocks that have been approved to date within downtown Superior. They include outlots that are proposed to contain publicly accessible but privately owned drive lanes that provide internal vehicle access. Morgan Ranch is proposing, however, to keep their proposed parking areas on private lots. This is not consistent with prior development approvals within downtown Superior, where public access easements have been included for all pedestrian pathways and parking areas within the development blocks. Nor have we really got an explanation as to why there's an alternative approach proposed for these blocks here. Because shared parking proposal is based on surface parking spaces being available to the public, staff again is recommending both easements for both walkways and surface parking areas. In this context, site plan on the left was included with their FDP application. It shows in general, like all the purple that you see, the lines are accessible paths through the development. Typically staff gets easements over these areas, and we're not getting very many easements in this application through the majority of the blocks. So the illustration on the right is in order to kind of clarify where public access easement can actually go through the parcel. So there's one 8-foot wide easement proposed within Block 6, and then Parcel K, which is the promenade and downtown plaza, would also be publicly accessible. And then south of Main Street, it's really just limited to the drive areas that allow for access to the row homes proposed within those blocks. Morgan Ranch is generally proposing, kind of shifting over to the development application, to develop the area with land uses illustrated on this slide. 3 exclusively commercial areas are proposed on Block 4, Lot 2, Block 7, and Lot 3 of Block 7, highlighted in red. The areas in yellow are generally cover the northern halves of Block 6 and Block 7, as well as the southern halves of Blocks 9 through 11, and those are proposed for residential development. Morgan Ranch is proposing a mixed-use commercial development for the areas shown in purple, which includes the southern portion of Block 6 and the northern portions of Blocks 9 through 11. Later in this presentation, I'll address Morgan Ranch's live-work request, which is a significant part of this application, but this initial summary focuses on their non-live-work proposal, which is essentially viewed as the preferred option and the proposal most consistent with the planned development. This development option would create roughly 73,000 square feet of commercial retail space, 7,500 square feet of civic space, 382 residential apartments, and 64 row homes. This version of the proposal is also most consistent with the concept plan that Morgan Ranch presented to PC and the town board in April. This commercial version of the Morgan Ranch proposal that we're discussing now is largely consistent with the land uses required by the PD illustrated on this slide. Block 4 is shown and proposed for commercial, as are the areas immediately adjacent to the downtown plaza and the eastern blocks of Main Street. Block 4 is illustrated in red because the entire parcel is zoned for commercial regardless of whether or not it occurs on the first floor or the second floor. And the areas immediately adjacent to downtown plaza kind of reflected in this red hatching. And on these portions of Main Street have a ground floor commercial requirement. And then the other, it's a little bit harder to see, but there is a distinction here for the land uses on this north side of Main Street and on the south side of Main Street that's separate from the rest of those blocks. And there's a residential limitation to those blocks, but it is all kind of flex zoning. And then the residential limitation really restricts the residential uses of those areas to 25%. This side-by-side comparison helps illustrate the general compliance of the proposal in terms of land uses. Some variances for their commercial request are still, however, required. And those are illustrated here on the right. So the civic space is technically not ground floor commercial, and neither is their request for a clubhouse leasing area on this corner of the plaza. These variances are detailed more in the coming slides, but allowances for both civic space and commercial within the commercial area, as well as what I just stated for their clubhouse use, are required. The following slides provide an overview of each development block. Block 4 is illustrated here and proposed at just over 3/4 of an acre. A map of the entire FDP area is included on the left with a subject block highlighted. A larger Block 4 site plan is provided at the top right, and a perspective image of the 5,500 square foot restaurant is illustrated on the bottom right. Subsequent slides are arranged comparably. The site plan clarifies that the building proposed for Block 4 would be sited on the eastern portion of the site, just north of Creekview Way. The parking lot located on the west is located on the west of the intersection here of Marshall Road and Creekview Way, and is proposed to have 2 drive cuts. It's also proposed to have 44 parking spaces. Morgan Ranch is proposing an additional angled parking as part of their street FDP application within Creekview Drive as well. Peak parking demands for this restaurant, for a restaurant of this size, will exceed the 44 on-site spaces. So that's part of the reason, presumably, that they're requesting the change to the designed alignment of Creekview Way. The FDP list parking within this location is shared. As mentioned, staff infers that this parking is to be public. However, we prefer to have the label on the FDP be more explicit and confirm that it is public, not just shared. And then we also prefer to have an easement over that whole parking area in order to ensure public access to that area. So block 6 is shown here. It's proposed at 3.75 acres and includes 7 buildings. No additional subdivision of block 6 is proposed. The entire block would be owned and maintained by Morgan Ranch. So the northern portion of this block is proposed to have 6 apartment buildings, accommodating 18 units per building for a total of 108 apartments. 3 of the 6 units would front either an adjacent street, which is Creekview Way to the north, or Promenade Drive to the east. The other 3 units are sited internally, a little bit more clear here, to face north or south, and do require exceptions to building orientation requirements. All of their proposed apartments are 41 feet in height or less, and a perspective rendering of those, or one of those finishes, is shown on the top right here. And then on the southern portion of block 6, a 226,000 square foot mixed use building is proposed with structured parking. This building is proposed to be 5 stories tall and stand 72 feet in height at its highest point, and include an additional 76 apartments in addition to 302 parking spaces, 7,500 square feet of that civic space that we mentioned, and 8,600 square feet of ground floor commercial space. A rendering of this structure showing that clubhouse space, the civic space, and then this portion is fronting Main Street, is shown on the bottom right there. So the Morgan Ranch, or the height requirement for this block is 65 feet. So Morgan Ranch will require a variance to reach the 72 feet they're requesting. That 5th floor area is roughly 2,400 square feet in size, and it's to accommodate the pool building that's associated with their proposed pool for the apartment users on the 5th floor of that parking garage. The primary parapet for the rest of that building is closer to 50 feet in height. The proposed parking summary shown in the table on the bottom left is really just limited to the residential uses. Morgan Ranch's proposal includes a request to unbundle residential parking from the apartments proposed. This essentially means that spaces would be leased separately from apartments. The applicant, however, is proposing to reserve a certain amount of spaces for these residential uses. Those counts are reflected in this table and equate to roughly 1 space per apartment, regardless of the number of bedrooms proposed. So block 7 is here, shown on the right. It is proposed to include a mix of land uses. This block, however, would be subdivided into 3 lots. Lot 1 on the north, illustrated in yellow, is proposed to be developed residentially with 4 additional apartment buildings, and 2 of those facing either a street, or 3 of those, facing either a street or a promenade. Lot 2, block 7, is proposed just south of lot 1 and north of the downtown plaza. This lot is proposed for 2 one-story, 25-foot tall commercial buildings, as well as surface parking. One structure is reflected as being closer to 10,000 square feet in size, the other one at 3,800 square feet. A surface parking lot is proposed to the north of these buildings, but the plat does not, again, afford public access to this area yet. Lot 3, block 7, is proposed in the northwest corner of Main Street and Superior Drive. Morgan Ranch is proposing 2,600 square feet of additional commercial space over 2 floors on this lot. Perspective images of that building are in the bottom right. So this is the building you can see by the arrows, but this is the smaller of the commercial buildings proposed at this location. This is a kind of a block face view of the 10,000 square foot commercial building here. And then this is a different view, well, the same view actually as the last slide, for the apartments. But this is that new 2,600 square feet of kind of like an iconic corner of commercial space. Their narratives in the past have indicated that, you know, they would target such uses as breweries or coffee shops for this location. The materials proposed aren't exactly in conformance with the design guidelines, however. It includes all metal shipping containers and some polycarbonate panels. The design guidelines describe the town square or town plaza, illustrated here, as the heart of the development and as an area that is designed to accommodate a variety of uses, including town events. This area needs to be active also on a daily basis when no events are scheduled. The applicant received extensive feedback on the plaza design through the concept plan dialogue with the PC and the board in in April. This is another area that's envisioned as public, and it does have access easement established over it. It will be privately owned by the developer. However, so at 1.46 acres, parcel K is designed to include the plaza, which is reflected here, as well as the promenade, which we'll get to in a second. The plaza includes several amenities generally organized around a large central green, which is illustrated kind of better through Chase's rendering in this location, but this is that central green here. The central lawn is proposed to be finished with a synthetic turf, and a small performance stage is sited to the northwest of that lawn. Other amenities include a splash pad, swings, climbing boulders, as illustrated on the right, and other areas within this design include seating, shade trees, yard games, as well as table tennis. The slide clarifies the location of the promenade. So this is really just north. The promenade really extends on that western edge of the plaza as well, but this is the area north of the plaza between the apartment buildings, between blocks 6 and 7. The width of the promenade was identified as a concern through the review process and detailed in staff's memo. The applicant, I believe, has been able to widen this promenade over the last week, and I'll let them kind of address that. But the PD indicates that the promenade is supposed to be 45 feet in width. The application we got showed 28 feet in width, and the concern really was whether or not the amenities associated with the promenade, benches, the trees, everything, would be available to the public as well, because you have to have fire access through this area. And that was at minimum 20 feet, and in some locations shown at 28 feet, which is the entire width that they were proposing to begin with, which wouldn't allow for anything within that area, benches or trees, in order to ensure fire access. Staff memo clarifies how additional factors also contribute to how this area functions. In addition to width and publicly accessible amenities, the memo addresses adjacent uses, building separation, required architectural elements stipulated by the design guidelines that help activate this realm. Morgan Ranch is also proposing a dog park within Lot 1 of Block 7, and it's in the southeast corner of this block. Some elements within that dog park include a shade structure, a drinking fountain for both owners and pets. Maintenance of this area was not clarified. That's probably staff's, biggest concern with the dog park, and it will be critical given the park's adjacency to both the shared parking lot to the south and Superior Drive to the east, in addition to the residences just to the north. Moving south on Main Street, to south of Main Street, blocks 9 through 11 would be developed in similar fashions with comparable buildings and proposed uses. Large, roughly 50,000 square foot, 3-story mixed use buildings are proposed along Main Street with ground floor commercial uses and 2 floors of apartments above. A mix of studios, as well as 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments are proposed. That's the same for the mix of apartments on blocks 6 and 7. Clusters of row homes are proposed on the southern halves of these blocks. Surface parking and a private drive lane would separate these 2 uses. All of the 3-bedroom row homes that are proposed to include 2-car garages, so reserved parking within these lots is really limited to the apartment tenants above the proposed retail, and then there's some public parking shown as well. Given the demand for retail parking in proximity to Main Street, and ensuring public parking within these blocks will be important. So it's the same kind of issue here. The plat gives you access to the lanes, but not to the parking. So an easement would be recommended for these areas as well. The mixed-use buildings proposed are between 45 and 47 feet tall, and the row home units would vary between 39 feet and 44 feet, depending upon whether or not the 4th floor options are chosen by buyers. Both products are within the height allowances for this block, which vary between 55 and 65 feet. All of the apartments Morgan Ranch is proposing require one variance or another, depending upon what block they are proposed for and what residential typology has been identified. For blocks 9 through 11, Morgan Ranch is proposing unit sizes between 450 and 1,260 square feet. The residential typologies don't contemplate floor areas less than 900 square feet and don't contemplate studios directly either. And then the 3-bedroom units also require an exception because they're just not listed as part of the apartment classifications. So variances will be required for all of these definitions. And then kind of getting into these blocks individually, block 9 is reflected here. The block face for the retail is shown on the top right. That's what's going to face Main Street. This larger commercial building is roughly 50,000 square feet in size, would include over 16,000 in ground floor commercial area, and a comparable amount of retail floor areas on the 2 floors above, which would accommodate 36 apartments. 27 row homes are proposed to the south, and they're generally oriented to face the surrounding streets, except for the 6 units that are sited internally, which will require an exception from the design guidelines. The other row homes are sited to face Gateway Drive to the west, Old Railway to the south, or Marshall Road to the east. Surface parking is proposed between the 2 uses as mentioned, with 45 parking spaces accommodated. 36 of these would be used for the apartments. 9 are listed as shared. So moving over to block 10. This is a slightly larger block. It accommodates 53,000 square feet of space and just over 17,000 square feet of retail, 2 additional units, so 38 units in total of apartments above the retail. 57 parking spaces are proposed within this block, 38 reserved for the 38 apartments and 19 listed as shared. Morgan Ranch also lists the amount of street parking available, and for this block it's 40 additional spaces either on Main or on the other surrounding streets to the west, east, or south. And then the 19 row homes proposed here are identical to the row homes proposed on blocks 9 and 10. All of these ones have been sited to face an adjacent right-of-way. But the row homes actually do require additional variances as well. Notably, they don't have front porches to engage the street, and then their unit sizes are also not quite in line with what is required for attached row homes, one of the two floor plan models. And then finally, block 11 is sited directly south of the downtown plaza and immediately west of the sports stable. The size of this mixed-use building on this block is comparable to the one proposed for block 9, with a similar amount of ground floor commercial and identical amount of apartments, which was 36. 18, one fewer row home than on block 10 is proposed, and slightly fewer parking spaces, 52 parking spaces in total, giving 36 to the apartments and 16 listed as shared. So Morgan Ranch did provide a shared parking proposal as part of this application, which staff has reviewed and summarized in our memo. Alex Arenello is here tonight to answer questions on that study on behalf of the town. Staff has, raised a number of questions on that memo and in our staff memo as well. And then circling back to the live work request, as detailed in staff's memo, the applicant is requesting flexibility to reduce the amount of commercial floor area along Main Street by as much as 54%, from 73,000 square feet to less than 34,000 square feet. So opportunities for restaurant uses are reflected to decrease from 34,000 square feet to 18,000 square feet, and retail would decline from 39,000 square feet to 15,500 square feet. The PD zone regulations for Main Street are generally illustrated here on the left. We discussed those before, but they were a little fainter, so I colored them differently so they were a little more obvious. To begin, Morgan Ranch would like to interpret the residential restriction differently than the town does. So we're kind of starting with just an interpretation discrepancy, I guess. Within the blue area shown on the left, the town believes residential uses on the ground floor cannot exceed 25%, and the town interprets live work to be a residential use. Morgan Ranch believes residential restriction does not extend to live work allowances, and they've couched their proposal as an expansion of live work uses within this area versus an expansion of residential limitations that the town sees. Unfortunately, the applicant doesn't provide much of an explanation or justification for this request beyond clarifying the difficulties they may face with lending institutions in terms of financing. So staff referred this aspect of the proposal to the town's economic development consultant, Better City, who provided a memo on this, which was included with your materials tonight, and also summarized in staff's memo. And we're happy to get into this further as the evening progresses if we need to, but the short of it is the alternative land use request presents a significant change to what the PD envisions for the area. Residential uses do not generate sales tax, nor would they draw visitors to create the same active pedestrian environments that is envisioned by the downtown Superior plan development, much less for what is kind of envisioned for Main Street. In addition to requiring a variance request for the land use, the live work proposal would also require a variance from the allowed residential typologies for the core area of downtown, or the addition of a new typology. Only 2 residential typologies contemplate residential and commercial uses in one. It's the flex apartment over retail, which is illustrated on the left, and live work townhomes, which is shown on the right, both of which contemplate ground floor commercial being separate from residential living area above. The floor plans that Morgan Ranch recently provided staff clarify that ground floor residential uses are desired, so neither of these typologies worked. And the request to eliminate a clear floor distinction between land uses also raises additional concerns on how any work element could be ensured or regulated. In short, staff is supportive of Morgan Ranch's retail-focused proposal, but has difficulty commenting on or assessing their live work alternative given the detail that was provided within this request. So should PC be supportive of this allowance, I think additional dialogue is necessary. This concludes my portion of kind of this introduction. I'll turn it over to Chase now to run through the 3D model, and then we can let the applicant present.
Good evening. Good evening, Chase Mullen. It's snowing, yes. I have it, it has it start out with current weather conditions. So let's shift this back here. So I'll do a brief little just fly around, and then please direct me to what you guys would like to see.
And if you could zoom out well enough and maybe orient people that are looking, like what roads are which and what you're looking at, would be great.
So this is the promenade here. This is Superior Drive. This is the sports stable. Block 11, 10, 9, block 6, block 7, and then block 4 to the north there.
Okay. That's McCaslin to the far left, 36.
That is McCaslin to the far left, yeah. Yep. And then these are the blocks that wouldn't be developed through this proposal. This is 8, this is 2, and this is 5.
It looks like you might be heading down Main Street, which would be great. Seems like a good start. Is that the promenade or the plaza space?
Yeah.
Yeah. There.
This is lot 3 of block 7. This is Superior Drive. So this is the sports stable and medical office building are behind us. This is a shared parking lot proposed between lots 2 and lot 1 of Block 7. And this is the apartments within the northern part of Block 7. Creekview Drive, Park 2 to the right here, and then we're coming up on Block 4, which is the restaurant use proposed at the intersection of Creekview and Marshall Road. And then this is looking back down through the promenade. Northern portion of Block 6. And this is Marshall Road. This is the north side, or the west side, excuse me, of the parking garage. This is the entry to that parking garage. Apartment uses are proposed above the parking garage. 3 floors of which are on this side, and then 4 stories of apartment uses are proposed on the north side of the garage. So as Chase wraps around to Main Street, we transition to commercial on the ground floor and apartments above. Can you zoom back out and show where that height? So this is the proposed height exception here. This is the pool building that's proposed on the 5th floor of that garage. So you're going to have the parking kind of centrally located, and then a wrap structure with mixed uses on the south side of the site, and then all residential, and then parking garage access on the west side, all residential on the north side. And then you have their clubhouse leasing area on this corner that wraps like from this end around the side, and then the civic space is proposed here to front the plaza and promenade area. So that's where that stage is proposed. This is the central green. This is where some of their amenities are proposed to be the boulder climbing, and I can't remember some of the other ones. But then you have it all fronting the commercial uses that are proposed within Lot 2 of Block 7, these 2 buildings, and then also the additional lot or the additional development on Lot 3. But you can see some of the Chases included a lot of the color. You can tell the elements and the texture that have been incorporated into the park design or plaza design.
I'd say those colors are more diagrammatic than.
Correct.
Than
yeah, I mean, they're not, but they're all different is my point. Sorry.
The building that exceeds the height limits, can you just, what parts of that
So
are
it's just
exceeding?
this part right here.
Just that?
This
just-
part
okay.
extends above. So it's a 65-foot allowance, and 7 feet of this building extends above that requirement. Most of
Okay.
the rest of this is closer to.
Which is basically providing just indoor space to access the pool. So-
Yeah, an elevator,
Yep.
stairs, and then restroom amenities and stuff like that, lockers for the pool area.
I'd like you to pull back over to kind of Rock Creek along, and just want to get a view of this area from over there as well. And just kind of come down to, once you get over there, kind of come down to,
Over along Tract H and
yep,
Wiggins.
yep. What do we got? They're still at about 100 feet. Can we?
So
There.
the proposed buildings are just a little less saturated, just a little grayer back here.
Yep, okay. So that suggests they're not really even visible. We do, yeah, yeah.
Yes, there's just a little bit here.
And just kind of head towards McCaslin on there.
we're about 90 feet in the air to get over that ridge.
And maybe have you come down McCaslin from the top of the hill. Yeah.
You need to slow down, it's 35 today.
Okay, so that's blocks 9, 10, 11, or, well, that'd be 11. 11?
This is
Or
block
8.
9.
8, 9, 9, yeah, sorry. 11's in the
This
back.
is block 6.
Okay.
Oh, that is 9 still, I'm sorry. This is block 6.
Yeah,
So this
that's
is
Main
the-
Street. right?
Yeah. So that's an element, and then that's another element.
Can you come in over Marshall?
Yeah.
Keep going down. and
Keep going down, then go down where Marshall will be someday. Mm. Mm. There's Tesla.
You want to come down Marshall?
Oh, I would take a left
Sorry,
down Marshall.
sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Thanks, yeah, yeah. And just kind of follow through the way that's expected to go as best you can.
Oh,
Yeah.
there you go. We'll go off road.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, you can come on up a little bit.
Yeah, I do. There you go.
Is that it?
Mhm.
Okay, there we go.
And pause on the bridge here. Oh, okay. And the parking lot would be there on the left.
Yep, right here.
Okay.
And that's one proposed to be shared with the park, right?
And can you take us down to the promenade? Go down and then go through and then to the left?
What are we on here? This is,
The Main Street.
that is-
And then
Looks so
turn
different.
left or around. Yeah.
there we go.
There we go.
They gone as far as to propose a structure for the stage or just a platform?
It's got a covered structure, yeah. Metal posts and tinsel fabric covering. I think will get removed during the winter.
So this is currently drafted as the original proposed, not what has changed possibly over the last week. Correct.
It should be the same, I think, in terms of the building separation. It's really just a matter of what elements are public versus private. And the public element at 28 feet was really limited to what you see as the surface walkway without the, I don't know that Chase has put in any of the benches that are proposed within kind of the tree lawn. But that's what has been expanded to include that area as well, so that it's not just for the private residences of the apartment.
So that's the 28 feet that we're,
The 28 feet's really kind of just this paved area.
and should be 40.
Well, the PD said it was supposed to be 40 feet wide. Parcel K in this location, the application I reviewed was 28 feet. They've come back and said they've been able to add 9, so 37 feet in total, 4.5 feet on each side, in order to include those amenities, but they can get into those details because
Okay.
I haven't really reviewed them. Question?
I had a request of you. The internal row homes on block 9,
Nine is this guy.
This one, yeah.
yep.
Is that what you're proposing, is shared parking, that these external spaces? Or
They need public access easements in order for even the public that gets, the 9 or 16 spaces or whatever to get to them. That's how we've done it in the past. So
Okay.
I'm not sure why it hasn't been done yet.
Okay.
Same for the sidewalks and walkways through everything. But you had a lot to do. You didn't do both fourth story and three-story option, no toggle? Okay, just checking. Anything else view-wise from Chase? We have to stall anyway. Bill just walked out, so.
Well, it would be good to see again the parking garage coming from the west, looking towards the east as you're entering off McCaslin. Some suggestion that part of that structure, the parking structure, might be visible, but that looks wrapped. So, is the part that is visible the variance that's being asked for? Is that it? Not the structure itself?
It's a variance for height. I mean, anywhere it exceeds, it looks like it exceeds here too. I'm not sure what this is, but this is what they were requesting in their narrative. Oh, it's for the access to the garage. How tall is that? Okay, comparable for their access. When you park up here, you go to the stairs here to get down. And then this is their pool building for their private apartment pool.
On the Marshall elevation there, so it's, I can pick out where the parking garage entrance is, but the windows on either side, are those occupied spaces? Are those into the parking garage? What are those?
So there's bike storage, and then there's, internally, these are accessed within the garage.
Yeah.
I don't know if these are faux windows or not. The applicant can get into that. But there are kind of utility uses within here, one of
Okay.
which is bike storage. And then there's like trash enclosures and stuff like that. An area for residential, I think, is on this side, and the area for the commercial uses is further south.
So those won't be like transparent and super friendly
It's a good question.
from the walking perspective, it
I
looks like?
doubt it, yeah. But, and then there are a few little walkthroughs. I don't know if this is one of them, but there's one on Main Street, and then there's one that gets you out to the Plaza Promenade area from the garage.
Yeah, can we actually do the walkthrough? I think it was there, go back to your left, between a couple of the buildings, actually 2 more buildings down. I think there was like a pedestrian area to cut through. Yeah, can we
Hang on a
squeeze through
second.
there?
Commissioner Harper had a question back on the garage, I think, right? Are you?
Actually, it was a general question that the drawings that came showing the colour schemes for these buildings had much more colours in them.
This is just a massing model, so it doesn't have the color, no.
The facades of the buildings, do they actually look like that? I mean, is that an accurate rendering of what the fronts of buildings look like?
They'll have renderings they can show you, we can walk through. There is some comment about how articulated these building facades are. There's not as much on these. And then, so we can get into those details later, but I'll let the applicant address that through their presentation first.
Okay, go ahead.
Stephen, is this what you're talking about not having public access through there?
That's private right now, yep, for the apartments. So in contrast, you know, everything in like block 25 or 13 to the south, all those walkways have public access easements for anybody to walk through them.
Maybe this is a question for later, but is there any design differences, whether that's an easement or not? Are there higher standards for ADA treatments or anything?
No, they're showing that they meet ADA accessibility, so it shouldn't change. It should just be whether or not it's publicly accessible, you know, whether or not, you know, if we have a public access easement, I wouldn't have any concern about whether or not that community becomes gated, that type of stuff. But typically we also get, or what we've gotten in the past have been like specific parcel created. So the difference with, you know, especially block 6 is that it's all one block. There's no outlots, there's not, it's just one block for all of the buildings that are proposed within it.
And one other thing, has there been any request by the builder for variance in setbacks, either forward or side? Because on these renderings, and I know it's a model, but these look pretty tight.
Their building separation for a lot would be dictated by building code. Separation from parcel lines are really just, or from right-of-way is what the PD addresses. So although like this corner of the building would be meet the requirement because of the shape of the road, they wouldn't necessarily meet it for this corner. So where roads kind of curve, they would need setback exceptions. When you site something internally, like these blocks here or these units here, they're not, and all of our setbacks are done from public rights of way. Obviously this isn't 0 to 8 feet from a public right of way. And then obviously portion, and it's really more about building orientation. So staff's memo doesn't like tell you that these folks need, or these units need setback variances. They actually are probably within that element from Marshall Road, but they orient either to the north or the south. So that's really the setback exception, is how they orient. There is an allowance within the downtown core that they can orient towards a paseo, but paseos aren't really proposed. The promenade I would consider as a paseo. It's a parcel, or it's parcel K. So those setbacks would apply, and there are PD setbacks listed from both the plaza area and the promenade. So these orient correctly, don't require any exception, and have met the setback standards. And then generally, you know, everything except for what's kind of mentioned, it's more of a building orientation thing for these units as well as this building, and for the internal ones within block 9. But setbacks, and then along Main Street, it's really supposed to be kind of a 0 setback, or kind of a aggressive 0 setback. And I've talked to them about what we really wanted, because you don't want to have a situation where you can't have, you know, signage or elements that would encroach over that property line, and we're pretty strict with that. So they're not at 0. In most cases, they're pretty close, but they do have an allowance within the PD to have some variance. They're up to 50% of these facades along Main Street cannot be at a 0-foot setback. And technically there's more than that, but that's because staff didn't want it at a 0, where you didn't have any room for articulation on above floors, or you just have a blank wall. So I don't have any concerns with what they're proposing architecturally along Main Street. And then I think that the memo covers where they need exceptions in terms of setbacks anywhere else. But in general, I think the intent of the PD is met with the exceptions that have been noted. It's more of a building orientation thing for most of these units. There's a few variances where they aren't quite meeting setbacks for certain buildings, but it's really more due to they could try to align this building with the road, but it would be awkward. So.
Can you come down to down to ground level on the east end of Main Street in front of the sports stable, and just, I don't want to go down Main Street, just sort of looking at blocks 11 and 10 street facing, kind of what Anthony was. And there was discussion, just of the opportunity for, if there were a cafe or a restaurant, being able to come out onto the, being able to have seating out on the sidewalk or the streets. Is there even?
There is that you can kind of see it. Oh, keep picking up my pen instead of the pointer, but there is like an arcade kind of enclosed area on each of the building corners. And those are kind of designed more for restaurant uses. We don't have any particular uses identified in any of these areas yet. But they have kind of built that into their designs already.
But that is the intended.
Particularly on those corners.
Commercial along this,
And then
but it's subject to their.
The other element is that the Metro District owns parcels. So there's parcels that are really adjacent to the right-of-way here that give them more opportunity to expand, patio elements, cafe seating, that type of stuff. Bringing out, like if it's a retail use, bringing out displays within those areas, which would typically get done by a city that, just allows for some sort of sidewalk easement or something like that. But it's built into the PD where it's Metro District owned parcels that they kind of control it, and it's just built in because that allowance is desired in order to kind of activate the area. So same for parcel K. So that plaza area, the uses proposed around it, and particularly, lot 3 can spill out over onto that parcel for those type of uses as well.
Okay. Then could you go back over to the plaza one more time and just look down the promenade? I guess that would be, yeah. Because the idea was at one point that this would be a pretty nice walkway between the parks and
So Chase, on your lighting, are you able to do different seasons?
I can do time of day and year. The leaves won't change yet.
Right. But the shadows across the building will be.
Yeah. Is there a time you're looking? Is there a specific time that you're looking for? Or?
Come back to that building shade, right? What was that? That must have been.
So September.
So we're in September 9th.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go. Can we go to like the middle of summer, like July 4th? Let's pick some dates when people will be in the park. And then what time do we start getting a good shadow across the plaza? By like 7:30 or 8.
Two, 3, 4, 5.
That's June 21st. It's the solstice.
So getting in.
That's fine. June 21st is fine.
What time was that? That was 6 you got to?
There's 4:25.
Is it still light out?
6.
So concert time. We're getting
7.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Oh, it's a cloud that's in the way. It's not the sun setting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It is.
It is.
Nice. And then can you just change that to December 21st? And then back out and see when, just as far as the time goes. That's good, 20, 10th, whatever, that's fine. And then just back out on your time to like 4 p.m. or something like that.
Yeah, so here's 10, 11, noon, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Good,
5.
thank you.
And then if you
Yes,
can,
I mean-
if you can indulge me again, the metal building that is from Containers, can we take a look at that?
In the daytime, right?
I think I'm a touch aggressive with the locations of the glass on this, so please, I think bear that in mind, but
That's another
And then there, yeah, and then ground level.
Some indoor space.
Yeah.
Some outdoor space.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting looking. Yeah, nice element. What were you looking for there, Anthony?
Perfect. And you've added these glass sections there and the mirror finishes and all of that.
Yeah, I think a couple of those were accidental. I think there's a couple more opaque surfaces.
Anybody else have any views they'd like to look at today? Will he be available if we do this next week, or we can discuss that, I guess, if we get,
Yeah, I haven't actually asked him, so.
yeah. Yes.
Next week, next Tuesday?
If we
Okay.
need you. Okay.
Super helpful. as
Thank you.
always.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah,
All right, thank you.
wonderful. Do you have anything else, Stephen, or are we ready for the applicant?
We're ready for the applicant. Can you toggle over? So you can go through with the keyboard, so I can pull up documents as you need to. I can't help you with the mic, though.
All right. Let's see, is there a mouse? For
No,
me?
no mouse, just the keyboard in order to get through it.
Oh, okay,
You
gotcha.
should be able to go scroll
Okay.
through, yeah.
All right, good evening. Bill Jenks here on behalf of both RC Superior and Morgan Ranch. So just to kind of orient you again to the project team, make some introductions. I'll start out with a broad introduction of the team and project, and then pass it off to our design team to take you through some of the details and architecture. To start, I'm really excited to be here. I've literally been waiting for this moment since I started working on the project in January of 2016. The development of Main Street, I think, is, obviously, for a lot of reasons, the most exciting part of this project. And I'm just thrilled that we can continue to be a part of it. So, and a quick note, it hasn't been easy. I have literally been working on this part of the project since I started in January of 16, so 4 years ago. It's taken a lot of time to find a partner in Morgan Holdings that has the same shared vision that we have and the town has, that has the capability to do this with us. And then, putting together the project team and all of the financing partners has been a long process. So again, we're just happy to be here and looking forward to getting through this. So Ranch Capital and Morgan Holdings are 50-50 partners in Morgan Ranch. We're working with a really top-notch team of consultants, including David Hicks Lampert as a retail broker, KTGY as our architect, Dig Studio as our landscape architect, CFC Construction as our pre-construction consultant, and Civil Resources, Jim Brostovich, as you know, has been working on the project since it started back in 2013. So he's a great asset to keep on as well. So just quickly, KTGY is a really successful architecture and planning firm headquartered in Irvine with a growing 40-person office here in Denver. They've completed the design of over 200,000 residential units while achieving over 650 design awards in their 27-year history, so really top-of-the-line architecture firm. Bill Vitek and Ryan Godders are here from Dig Studio, a landscape architecture, placemaking, and urban design firm with offices in Denver and Phoenix. Dig focuses on thoughtful and creative solutions that help connect people and define a community's unique sense of place. The firm's leaders have worked on some of Denver's most notable projects, including Stapleton, Belmar, and numerous development projects around Coors Field and Denver Union Station. CFC Construction is a Colorado-based general contractor that specializes in mixed-use and multifamily projects. They've completed 3,000 multifamily units and have another 1,500 under construction currently. So they're really adding to the team with constructability and pricing and all of that important detail. David Hicks Lampert is a Denver-based retail broker who's working with us to market all of the retail space and make sure we can really successfully activate all of that commercial space that's part of the project. And then Ranch Capital, as you know, is a private equity firm based in San Diego, founded in 2002. We've got about $2 billion of committed investments in a broad range of asset classes. The principals, including myself, have been involved in the ground-up design and development of over 3 million square feet of commercial space, including hotel, office, entertainment, and retail uses. And then I'll have Ryan come up just to make a quick introduction for them, and then we'll keep going.
Thanks, Bill. Hey, everyone. I'm just as excited to be here. We've been working. Oh, hi, I'm Ryan Morgan with Morgan Holdings. Just as excited as Bill to be here. So we've been working on this for well over a year and a half. And the vision that you guys have, that he has, and that we have, I think you guys are going to love. And I can't wait. We are a third generation development company. My grandfather started putting up sticks with his bare hands in Houston in 1959. And 16,000 units later, coast to coast, we keep coming back to Colorado because this is where we love. I actually just moved out here yesterday for the winter storm, but for this project and because we are very excited to get this going. Most recently in Colorado, we built 3,100 in Boulder, Solana, Cherry Creek, and Glendale, and worked on a number of projects in Arvada and Highlands Ranch.
So a quick summary of some of the progress to date. Like I said, I've been working on this since 2016, but more recently, we did have a couple of small group of competitive developers, including Morgan Holdings, come and make a presentation to town board and staff on May 7th, which was really kind of taking the town's temperature on a couple of different concepts and which direction we should go. Ultimately, obviously, we chose to continue with Morgan Holdings. We came back in April of 2019 for a concept plan presentation that I think a lot of you were present at. We sat around the table and took some comments. We've been meeting with town staff since then and going back and forth on FDP comments and red lines, but had a meeting with them following that concept presentation in May. And then June, we did come to the town board for a concept presentation to discuss specifically that civic space design. And so we've taken some of those comments and incorporated them into the current FDP. Met with town staff again in September, and here we are in October, hoping to get this project approved by the end of the year so that we can start construction in the first quarter of next year. So I'm just going to kind of orient you. I know Stephen Nardi did a great job of this. And again, I want to say a big thank you to Stephen. He's been working his tail off, making sure this stays on schedule and doing a great job. So as always, thanks for your help, Stephen, and the rest of staff. So I think he did a good job orienting you already. This presentation is obviously for blocks 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 4. As considered in the PD, you know where all the uses are. Generally, the light blue is flex space, which includes any allowance of commercial, residential, live, work, hotel, civic, or education, and then with some commercial restrictions around Main Street and the plaza, which generally the site plan responds to. So just from a macro level, speaking for RC Superior for a second, as you know, block 13, 25, and 16 through 21 down in the bottom right-hand corner have all been approved now. We're working on a residential application for block 26 and 27 with Remington Homes. That'll follow this one shortly, either at the end of this year or beginning of next year. But with that, and with the approval of the Morgan Ranch project, the entire Superior Town Center PD area is really spoken for, except for blocks 2, 5, 8, and then the second hotel block along the freeway here. So obviously with the Toll Brothers approval here and with the Morgan Ranch presentation in front of you, we're making, big strides towards getting this thing built out and really having a special place to start enjoying. So looking forward to it. So with that, I'm going to let KTGY come up and go through their presentation along with Dig Studios. I know Remington, I think you guys have some slides to look at too, and then we can circle back. I do want to address some of Stephen's comments and questions from the application at the end of this, and then obviously happy to keep going as long as you want. Thank you.
Let's see if I can do this one. Oh, this is terrific. Good evening, Commissioners. Terry Willis with KTGY, Principal of the Denver office. So I think Bill gave a good introduction of KTGY. So the last time we presented it, this was the status of the plan, which is different than what you're seeing today. And there, I'll just orient you. You probably haven't seen this color plan, but just right now. But this is Superior, Creekview, Marshall, and Main Street. So the primary differences from this plan and what we're going to show you in the next plan over is the orientation of the roadhouses at the south. We had them perpendicular to Old Railway, and they're now we've now made them parallel to Old Railway. We had a clubhouse for the residential in this location, which opened out onto a ground level swimming pool in support of the overall residential environment. And in the process of meeting with the town board and informal meeting around the table, it was suggested that this would be an ideal place for the civic center, civic component of this downtown development. And so the next iteration is where we included that. What also resulted from further evaluation is, okay, once we put the civic center there, how do we park it? So what went from a kind of a residential and retail parking lot, it became a parking structure to support the parking demand that we had in the center of town. So those changes, and the last change is it was suggested that at the end of the promenade to locate the restaurant at the end as kind of an anchor to this end. So commercial on the south end of the promenade, terminating in commercial on north end of the promenade. So that's where we were. Here is the change, which now shows the townhomes parallel to Old Railway. It now shows a parking structure in the middle of a bigger building. The pool in this configuration went away. Well, it didn't exactly go away, but it went to the top of the parking structure. So it now has a view, and it's the pool house that protrudes above the limits to the height in there. But it's representative of about 4% of the size of the building. So effectively a tower on the building, well set back from its edges. And then this is the location of the restaurant in Block 4. So Bill, do you want to go through the plaza, and then we'll go back to architecture? Sure.
Good evening, Commissioners. Bill Vitek, Senior Principal with Dig Studio. As the landscape architects on the project, we always feel our role is to bring the public realm, the public spaces to life, create places where people want to be, where they want to live, where they want to shop, where they want to play, and really where we define, a sense of community. And I think as we talked last time, we really see the Parcel K, or the Central Plaza, as we refer to it, as that kind of heart and soul of downtown Superior, a place where so many of the great events that you have in town could be held, the Chili Fest, the annual run, holiday events, et cetera. So, we really see this as that type of central gathering spot that becomes iconic, unique, memorable to everybody, not just people who live within this overall project, but to all the people that live within the town of Superior. So just drilling down into the plan a little bit further, we've always talked about this kind of arcing walk as being a central organizing element to the overall space. So it connects Main Street here kind of running plan east-west, and then connecting it to the new civic space, which is at the ground floor of this building right here. So we even like that notion of adding that civic component function right here. And the way Terry and team have kind of beginning to look at detailing this architecture, this could have, a lot of transparency and roll-up doors to an outdoor plaza and seating steps right here. But this overall shape really becomes that organizing element, frames the town green space itself. And again, I think we had some conversations about, yes.
Sorry, just a quick question.
Yeah.
Roughly how many people do you think could gather in that space? Say if we had a concert or an event,
Yeah, so we did some studies on square footage, and so this would be the stage right here. The orientation would be to the stage right here. So in the gathering space right here, we figure you can get on the lawn space itself. We figure you can get close to about 2,000 people on the lawn itself. In the total space, if you were to have your Chili Fest and people are just milling around everywhere, if you look at all of the kind of public realm areas all the way around, the plazas, the seating, Main Street, et cetera, that you can get close to about 3,500 people in a kind of in a large event. So, and there's industry standards we kind of use for square footages on that. So the overall organization is the arc, the central lawn, and we talked about it being a synthetic lawn, the stage structure right here, which would be a series of metal columns that can maybe have that kind of industrial feel of kind of the old, kind of harken back to some of the wayfinding that Bill and the team are producing, but kind of some steel industrial kind of posts with some fabric structures that can be taken down in the winter. This area here, we got the 7, it'd be a splash pad, interactive fountain area. So for kids, there's nothing better for attracting families to an area like this is a water feature. This would be kind of contained with a planter and some steps, the way the grading works, to a lower area right here, so it can provide some safety and some barrier. This is that kind of iconic coffee house brew pub whiskey tasting venue that you were looking at earlier. We envisioned there would be some kind of containment rail because of Colorado's license and liquor law around this building, at least on this side, for outdoor consumption of alcohol. It also could have an area, though, for outdoor games, bocce ball, cornhole, those types of things. So a very active, fun type of space. And then this area over here is where we're envisioning more of a kind of a multi-age play area, a larger climbing rock for older children and young adults, smaller climbing features, and then a series of swings, kind of iconic swing structures that would line this edge of the space right here. And then the retail edges of the buildings themselves obviously engage the strong arc walkway, and even we're looking at this end of the building having some exterior space, again, where you could have some outdoor functions, outdoor games, big outdoor patio area, et cetera. And then all that frames and brings you to the promenade right here. Just some precedent images, thinking lots of flexible seating for moving around to lots of good questions about how does the sun go through the space and where are you in sun and where in shadow. And that's the great thing about flexible seating. It allows you to move it around to accommodate that. Notion not quite as big as the fountain in front of Denver Union Station, but this idea, flush surface, pop jets, interactive water that attracts kids and families. Some unique kind of seating elements beyond the flexible seating, but some large pebble stones. This is the type of larger rock climbing sculpture that we're thinking about right here. If you've been up to Aspen, right at, I think it's Hyman Street, they have a large one right there by their park, and it's used all the time. And we really like the multi aspects of a structure for that all kids could use, even young adults, even old adults. And then the lawn surface itself can just become that great flexible space where you could, if there is an event going on, you could informally, play catch or throw a frisbee or kick a soccer ball. But for structured events such as festivals, outdoor movies, it really becomes a space. Concerts becomes a really, again, a iconic kind of gathering space for the overall community. And then there has been a lot of questions tonight about the discussions on the promenade. So Plaza just is down at this end right here. This is the tail end of the larger wrap structure with the civic space component right there at that end. So we transition from the plaza as we move north up into the larger park right here. This is block 4 and the restaurant location right here. But again, what we've tried to do is kind of continue this notion of using these arcs as visual cues to pull you from one space to the other and pull you through from the main plaza space itself to the park element here. And these cross sections are taken in a couple different spots to kind of show what the character that we're envisioning. So we do have ground floor residential here at these units on both sides, but we do have 37 feet from property line to property line. We're required by the PD4 amendment to have a 20-foot clear zone for fire truck and service access. And then we have some landscape buffer areas in here that soften these edges for these outdoor patios and terraces from the residential units. So we don't see these as really thick, dense screens. It's more of a front porch kind of approach that if you're walking up and down the promenade and you see your neighbor, you could stop, you could say hi, you could wave. It's not that it's a really tall barrier, but there is a little bit of landscape separation to kind of create that degree of what we like to refer to as that degree of separation between kind of public or semi-public to semi-private type of space. And so that is 37 feet from here to here. These range to about 7 to 8 feet in terms of these exterior terrace patios. The buildings do notch back in some areas. We're about 45 to about, I think, 54 feet in terms of building wall to building wall along these edge faces right here. The buildings do step in. I'm sorry?
Could you just repeat that
Yeah,
distance
let me give
again?
you the exact dimensions here so I don't. Yeah, so the building face to building face, so these darker, heavier lines, these are the vertical planes of the buildings, we're 47.5 feet at the tightest to up to 53 feet where the buildings notch and have some recesses or the buildings step back a little bit. So from what you really perceive in terms of the volume of the space is that dimension is 47 feet plus. And then in just what other different ways of treating that cross section, we do see in areas like the intersection of these crosswalkways, the options for these little kind of type of pocket parks where we would integrate some built-in seating, have some special paving, potentially other elements that make this a special node as you're coming up the promenade as well as you're coming east-west through the residential area itself. Maybe some ornamental plantings, maybe some light shade structures, but we're trying to create these little moments along the promenade, both here and where we have the curves, putting in some built-in benches to reinforce that curve form here, as well as here, that become seating elements up and down the promenade as well.
Before we move on from there, I wanted to point out a couple of things on the landscape that we just didn't talk about. We do still, as part of the master plan, envision Main Street as a closable area for special events like Chili Fest or that kind of thing. You can see the traffic circulates really well, even if Main Street's closed. You still have access to all the drivable areas as well as the garage entrance here if you close Main Street from this point to this point. And that is all zero curbs, so that really functions
really, really well and has been designed from day one to function really well as an extension of this plaza across the street, where this whole space can operate as a single space that in effect doubles the size of that plaza. And that would obviously bump up that occupant load that Bill mentioned. And then just quickly on the promenade, the intent was not at all to reduce the width of the promenade from the original PD. The original PD had a 45-foot space with 0 setback on either side. This really, in effect, is a 47-foot space with 0 setback on either side. The question is really where that invisible property line lands. Is it at the building face, or is it inboard of these trees? We've moved it inboard of the trees for a couple of reasons. One, from a fire code standpoint, to have enough windows, you need the property line to be a little bit further away from the building, which means you don't want a 0 property line here. You'd rather have the property line out at least 10 feet from the building. Also, that provides some space for, as Bill was talking about, that semi-private area where you can have patios that open onto that space, and you can have activation where if it was truly just a 45-foot wide public right-of-way with building faces on it, you wouldn't be able to have any of those patio interactions or kind of activity on that ground floor that we're designing for. So we're doing everything in an attempt to make this promenade a really inviting, active space with neighbors outside, patio furniture, people having glasses of wine, interaction, as well as public benches and sort of pocket parks and nodes for people, public to enjoy. So I just wanted to point out that's an important feature that we in no way intended to reduce the width of promenade.
So we're going to take you through a series of renderings of what this might look like. And as you can see, it's not just all gray. So there's a variety of materials. So this first view is looking west on Main Street, and this would be block 11, block 10. Actually, it's kind of fuzzy for me here at this angle. I think this is block 10, and then 9 is just off the view. But the intention is to have a very, very active facade, and have it be an active environment. This is where we've kind of, even though there's a build-to requirement on these buildings, we have set back each of the corners to allow, under the assumption that the restaurateur would probably prefer to have the corner location, is to set that back to allow some seating undercover or spilling out onto the sidewalk on the side street. We also designed this in such a way that it's more of a traditional Main Street that evolved over time. So rather than having giant block-long buildings, even though technically that's what we're going to have, is a block-long building, we are making it look like this is something that grew over time, and each of the storefronts would have its own independent character. As a matter of fact, getting down to the storefront level, we're actually thinking about making that be part of the tenant improvement, is actually to do a storefront that is custom to that particular tenant and user. So a variety of materials, a lot of brick, stucco, a lot of cement board siding, variety of roof forms, variety of roof heights. So all of that to provide character and variety as you move down the street. This is a view from the opposite angle. The building we were just looking at is down here. This is looking at from the western end of block 10, looking back. And you can see, even though it's kind of similar, it's not the same. So there is, again, a continuation. We're stuck inside of a height limit and inside of not wanting to have these buildings on the south side to be so tall to cast shadows all the way across the street. These buildings are shorter here than the wrap building on the north side of the street. But creating as much variety as we can within this context, and you can see how hopefully it has this level of energy, excitement, and activation in concert with what's already been built with the landscaping and the paving. This is a view, kind of the building we were just looking at is here. So across the street would be the wrap building, where we've taken the bottom 2 floors of the wrap building and have extra high retail space of that. We've taken the residential above and kind of made it a background building, if you will. It's kind of set back 10 to 15 feet, I think actually about 12 feet predominantly down its length. So when you're on Main Street, I don't think you'll really even, engage much with the residents above. There is the occasional terrace that comes off the residential that there could be people, conversing and enjoying Main Street from an aspect up above. Again, variety of storefronts and a variety of materials activating that space. This is looking, we talked in the previous segment about accessing the garage off of Marshall. That would be the vehicular access. This is one of 2 pedestrian, actually 3 pedestrian accesses into the garage. So it's really quite open and accessible to the public. So this would be off of Main Street, kind of near the west end of the building, but you can see a tall open access into the parking structure behind through the retail. And I think the next couple, Bill, are probably for you to talk to.
Sure. So this is looking at one of the kind of the cross axes back to, or down Main Street back to the sports arena. This is modified a little bit in the latest design, but that is the interactive kind of play area, which would be right behind the trees. Sorry, thanks. So we're looking at Main Street back towards the arena here. And then this would be that iconic, or that the kind of container building. And then the interactive play area would be right back here behind the trees. And then this would be just some flexible seating in this location there. And then this is another view. We're kind of standing at the intersection of that crescent arc walkway that engages the retail building with restaurants that engage onto that promenade type of feel. And then running north-south right here would be the promenade going towards the park. So I think what these kind of renderings do begin to really help portray those kind of the richness and the plant materials, some detail in the lighting fixtures, the character of the paving, all those kinds of things that really add so much and are so important to the texture and the feel of a place like this, and to help give it identity.
So this again is the wrap building as seen from Main Street Plaza here. This would be the kind of the commercial business aspect of the residential component, which is the leasing office retail down the street. And this is, you're starting to see the beginnings of the civic space. And then it doesn't really show up very well, but this is the garage access point here, which is a fairly wide, I want to say close to 20 foot wide access way into the garage. We're imagining that would have kind of graffiti artwork on the side. The civic space is a 2-story space that the upper level is actually accessed off of stairs that come down on the exterior and then kind of spill out onto the plaza to engage the civic space with that. And you can see also how residential up above can interact with Main Street and the plaza. And then this is a view of the civic building itself, and we're imagining that the exterior facade of this is one that can be permeable, if you will, with garage doors that open to really connect this space to the plaza. It's a two-story space, which right now we've just, we're not designing the interiors of it so much as creating a volume within the building that will be adaptable to whatever the town of Superior wants it to be. Here you can see this notion of the staircase coming down and spilling out onto the plaza. Again, very, very open storefront that allows this to be as open or closed as you need or want. This is the main entrance in, which is kind of at the axial terminus of this angle walkway that cuts across the south side of the town green, where the arcing path also comes down and kind of lands at that same location. So all the major paths kind of lead to this town of Superior civic space that's along the promenade, with a brick base and again a kind of a custom Ichiwa textured cement board siding.
I just wanted to jump in. I think everyone on the commission's aware, but for anybody listening, RC Superior, via the original cost sharing agreement under the master plan approval, has a $10 million civic space obligation. Part of that pays for parks, and part of that pays for some sort of flexible indoor civic space. This 10,000 square foot gross space is part of satisfying that obligation on behalf of RC Superior. So this will be built by the project and integrated into the design, obviously, but then separated via either a parcel or airspace parcel or condo map, and then dedicated back to the town. So this is really going to be the town's building that the town can use for whatever you'd like it for. It has separate utilities, and it's been designed to function on its own with its own elevator and all of those services, own bathrooms and all of that. So our hope is that the town continues its great programming and comes up with new events to do in this space that can spill out into the plaza and help activate that space and kind of work with events in the plaza, concerts in the plaza, that kind of thing, and really function as an indoor-outdoor public space anchoring that corner. So,
go ahead. Then a little more definition of the civic space. The first floor, these were these steps that spilled down from the second floor, but again, just kind of open space that can be whatever the town needs or wants it to be, whether that's library space, whether that's co-working space. It's available for those. We have vertical circulation within it. We have restrooms on each level and vertical circulation connecting the two levels. The upper level is actually a double height space, so it's the equivalent of levels 2 and 3 of the apartment building adjacent to it. So this can be divided into space, subdivided into spaces, so you could have multiple functions happening simultaneously, or one main function and a breakout space or a lobby space. So this will all be developed and evolved in concert with the town of Superior, and we've extended the space back into this kind of L shape here, with the idea that maybe the catering kitchen happens at this location to service these function rooms up front, and then in both floors, kind of restrooms on the south end that are adjacent to the commercial aspects of the wrap building. So this is a view of some of the 3-story walk-up buildings that are on the north half of the site, north half of blocks 6 and 7. But you can see the character. We have a variety of materials, 3 primary materials on each building, but there's 2 palettes mixed in through the buildings. You can sort of see the second palette over here, where it's more kind of grays and blacks. We didn't mention tonight, but the kind of the The idea is kind of subtly harking back to the kind of the coal mining history of this area. So that's why you see a lot of metalwork and a lot of black, frankly, in coloration, as well as kind of hardy materials of the vintage with a lot of brick in the project. Here you can see in the alternate palette where this building might have the red brick, and this building has the gray brick facade. And then I think this is the end. Finally, the Block 4 restaurant building, one notion of that building. And I know, I think our clients have had great success already, actually, in trying to line up tenants for this, or users for this this building, which no doubt will also change the programming of it in that process. I think that's, oh yeah, this is your oh yeah.
So this is talking about the live work exception that Stephen referenced. And I fully understand that this is a ask on our behalf. It is a exception to the PD, which did limit the amount of live work allowed by quite a bit more than this is showing. But it's an important ask, and that's the only reason we're making it. We've been working on financing this whole construction project over the past 6 months or so, and have consistently gotten really strong feedback from every single person we've talked to that the commercial space is a liability. That comes from a couple of different places, I think, in the market. And this, gets into a little bit more of a kind of a macro market conversation, but as everyone's heard a million times, retail is generally struggling nationwide. Part of that's due to the Amazon effect. Part of that's due to just retail being overbuilt, and this area is no exception. There are a lot of vacant storefronts down towards Flatirons and even in the shop spaces across the street in Superior Marketplace. And from a financing perspective, when you're a bank making a big construction loan or an equity partner investing a big chunk of cash equity to build this, that doesn't look great. And the 70,000 square feet or 73,000 square feet of commercial does look like a potential risk. So this is the live work plan that we're showing here is not the plan. It's not our idea of the way to go for this. We are trying very hard to lease all these commercial spaces to true retail. This is really a backup plan or an insurance policy, if you will, that we need in order to successfully raise the capital to build the rest of the project. So just to describe that sort of generally, there are 70,000 square feet of commercial space is a lot of commercial space. It costs a lot of money to build that commercial space. If we build this whole project over the next 2 years, and for whatever reason the commercial space doesn't lease to traditional retailers, now there's a huge investment in empty commercial space that's just sitting there and not providing any return. That potentially, it's big enough, the retail space in this project is big enough that could potentially cause a failure across the whole project, regardless of how well the residential is doing, because that commercial space costs so much and is such a big component of the project. And that's why we have to come up with some sort of an answer to these financing partners' concerns on this. So again, the blue space is space that we think was allowed by the PD to be potential live work in the original zoning. The white spaces here would remain commercial, likely restaurants at the hard corners of the buildings. And then the red space is an additional request that we're making that was required in the PD to be strictly commercial. And we're saying if we build this, which is going to take 2 years-ish, and then we can't lease it and it sits vacant for 18 months after we finish it, then we should be able to convert it to live work so that we can get some activity on Main Street, get some uses in here, and start to create some monetization for the project that pays off those debts. So again, this is really, it's a backup position. It's an insurance policy. It's not our plan. But in the event that the retail didn't lease, which again, I do not think will happen, I think we'll be very successful. We'll find great retailers for this. But I need an answer to tell our partners so that we can get the money to build the rest of the project. So this is part of that. So we did have KTGY look at both.
Mr. Jinks?
Yes.
Can I interrupt real quick? Can you maybe talk a little bit more about what that live work flex space will look like, kind of specifically?
No, absolutely. And that's where I was actually going with this next slide. So we have had KTGY look at floor plans for the design of the live workspaces. There are 3 different floor plan types: Plan 1, Plan 2, which is the longer version, and then Plan 3, which is actually a 2-story mezzanine version. So going back to that site plan, this is the Plan 1, the shorter version of the floor plan. Plan 2, the longer version of the single-story floor plan, and then Plan 3, that mezzanine 2-story live work product, would just be in Block 6 along this side where there's a 40-foot commercial depth. And so the design of those spaces is really intended.
I apologize for interrupting. Can you say a little bit about what kind of work goes on in live workspaces?
Yeah,
So
I mean, is this just purely office? Is it definitely live work? Is it?
It can be, it's as flexible as normal commercial space. So it could be a small retail boutique that is owned by a sole proprietor, or a small business that sells, boutique items, either soft goods or candle shop, or whatever you can think of. It could be a professional office, an architect operating as a sole proprietor, or a small office like that, accounting services, really anything that you would find in a normal commercial setting. This is more applicable to sort of the entrepreneur, the small business startup. It lets someone who doesn't have the business income to support an entire 1,500 square foot commercial space to have a storefront on Main Street with great access to traffic, grow their business, and also live there. It's kind of getting back to the old European model of, the live work, living over your shop type of thing.
But it also could be somebody's living room.
No. So
is there would be a requirement that those front spaces are
be used for, some sort of office use, and front doors would be open to the public. So we designed these.
One more, rental only or purchase?
Rental only.
Rental only.
Yeah. Okay. So we've designed these to require basically no modification to those elevations that you saw on Main Street. You'll still have the 12-foot storefront with all the glass. You'll still have a nice 17-foot clear height like a real commercial space. It's going to have a signage band. It'll look like a commercial space from the front. It just won't be as deep. So here, these 2 unit types would be on blocks 9, 10, 11 on the south side of Main Street. You've got about a 13 to 15-foot deep workspace here, and then it looks like a 20-foot deep workspace here, which it provides really many normal commercial spaces, as you would see, would have that size of a showroom in the front and have a bunch of back of office storage back here. This is just someone can also live here in the back of the unit. And then the living space, the kitchen and the living room, to your point, or potentially a bedroom in this case, face what we're calling the back wall of the building, which really faces that parking area in the middle of the block, which isn't super activated anyway. In a commercial space, that would be the back door. In these spaces, it's really sort of the front door of the residential part of the unit. And then these units are really interesting too. These are the units that would be on block 6 on the north side of Main Street. And these are great units because they have so much height there. You have a ground floor with a nice big 20 by 20 workspace in the front with a sort of flex kitchen and public bath that can serve that workspace like a traditional sort of little professional office would have a kitchen back there. And then you have stairs up to a mezzanine level where the bedroom and private bathroom are, which overlooks the open space below, but you can't see that from the workspace. So again, it's going to feel like a nice tall commercial space. It just provides the opportunity for someone to also live there. And again, we're only proposing building these out in the event that we can't find traditional retailers who want to lease the space, which I don't think is the case. It's just a contingency plan.
Can you go back to the chart showing which, so is that the ones in red?
So it would be all, the blue is what and to Stephen's point, there's some discrepancy over how much live work you can have by right under the PD. There's language that says, we should have had it on here, but here. Flex space with live work residential restriction, residential use not allowed within 25 50% of the Main Street ground floor frontage built as live work, which that language is a little bit confusing, so I don't know.
That's not where I'm going.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry about that. That's not where I was going, but we'll work with Stephen and you guys to make sure those numbers are acceptable to all of us. We'll get there.
Either way,
but
we're asking for a variance for
yeah,
this. So.
Understood. My question is more, so those designs you were showing, would that be for all this live work, red or blue?
Yeah, so the smaller boxes that you see here, here, and here would be that Plan 1 that was the shorter plan, single story. The longer boxes, whether they're blue or red, would be the Plan 2, which was the 20 by 20 workspace in the front with residential behind. And then these, both the blue and the red, would be that mezzanine style 2-story unit.
Okay. So the intent would be red gets, we shoot for commercial, 18 months later, can't do it. Somebody can come in, put a small commercial office, even
The plan is we shoot for commercial on all of this,
sure,
regardless.
And how long would leases run? Are these 3 years, 5 years, 1 year, 10 years?
On a live work, I would actually imagine it's probably shorter. It's probably a minimum 12-month, like a typical residential lease, and they can just renew if they want to stay there. Typical commercial lease is going to be usually 5 to 7 years base with a couple of 5-year options after that.
So I'd be interested in getting that in writing to some degree, right? That we because, I mean, this looks a little bit more attractive if we fill it with live work and it's a 12-month lease, knowing that if commercial comes along, there's an opportunity to put it there. And I don't know how we, get that communicated, but that's why I was asking the question. Those live work spaces could be shorter if those are shorter lease frame.
Well, in reality, once you spend because there's going to be a significant build out cost to build the live work unit in there, to build all the residential pieces of it. Once you build that, unless you have commercial coming in and banging at your door.
That's what I mean. If commercial comes back and wants to do a tenant finish.
It's very unlikely.
It is? Okay.
They certainly could. It would be purely market driven. If we had live work that we had built in one of these spaces and we had a commercial guy come in and say, I'll pay you, 1.5 times what you're getting on the live work rates, of course we would say, yes, please come on in. You can do the work and make it happen. If there aren't commercial spaces that can match the lease rate, then obviously that wouldn't happen. It's really just market driven and who comes. But in any case, we'll be marketing all of this as true retail space from the day we get approved, and we actually are right now already. And then we'll be building it out for roughly 2 years, continuing to try to lease it as retail space. If we're unsuccessful for that first 2 years and we open the project and all of this space is vacant, we have the option on the blue spaces to start turning those into live work as we determine necessary. And then on the red spaces, we have to wait 18 months after we deliver it. So really like 3 to 4 years from start of construction to start turning those into live work. And that's, again, it's a fallback position that provides some insurance.
And I think there were two. Did you have anything? Yeah, we had. No. Oh, okay, sorry about that. Okay, go ahead, Commissioner Harper.
Have you been marketing these retail spaces and commercial spaces already? And if so, for how long?
We've been softly marketing these for over a year. I mean, I've been talking to tenants since I've been involved. It's hard to get real hard commercial lease, basically leases in writing until you're closer to the start of construction, at least. Really, a lot of these smaller shop spaces are looking for space that they can occupy in the next 6 months. So we've been talking to a lot of people. We have a lot of interest, but I'm not going to announce any names of tenants until we're probably 6 months into construction and we have some critical mass of people that are actually signing leases.
And does live work rent for the same amount as commercial space or less than commercial space?
It really depends on the commercial rents we end up getting here. Probably to some regard, it would be about the same. Unless the commercial really does well, in which case commercial would be more. The live work, you're going to be limited. Live work really rents more as a residential unit than as a commercial space by the foot. So where commercial spaces in this area tend to pay between $30 to $50 per square foot, triple net per year, and that's depending on where you are. The spaces down the street here get 30. The stuff on Pearl gets 50 to 60. Residential, you're really leasing by the unit, so you have to convert that into, it's sort of like $2,500 a month is all that anyone's going to pay for a 1-bedroom unit. So at the lower end of the commercial spectrum, that ends up being about the same income, which again is why we're trying to come up with some way to monetize this space if commercial doesn't come, which again, I don't think will happen. I'm just trying to provide some backup plan.
Can you give us an idea of what kind of sales tax dollars we're going to be losing by this proposal?
You know, it's really hard to answer that question. You would still license all the business uses in this. So if you had an architect who wanted to have their live workspace and their office in the front, they would still license their business as a business with the town. And if you had a retail boutique, same thing. They would pay retail sales tax just like any other retail business. Obviously, as a result of changing it to live work, you're going to have a smaller square footage total in the project that's selling things. And so if you're looking at a pure, sales dollars per square foot, the total sales revenue might go down from if it was a 100% full commercial space. But the idea is if we're putting in live work, it otherwise would have been vacant space, and you're not getting any tax dollars on vacant space. The only reason we're going to put in live work is if we can't lease it to retailers. So you're not giving up anything by transitioning it to live work. You're actually creating an opportunity to get more tax dollars where you had vacant space and nothing before.
Well, I'm not sure I agree with your assessment. I guess we agreed that it was commercial space, and now you're trying to change it to this. You're saying you're not going to rent it. My concern are you as incentivized to put commercial space in there as live rent?
More so. The commercial space, if it does well, will rent for more dollars than a live workspace. We would prefer this to be 100% commercial, both from a design standpoint, from a revenue standpoint. Our first option is definitely to put 100% commercial in the whole space. The live work option is only if we can't find anybody who will lease it for pure commercial, which is why I'm saying the only way we're going to convert it into live work is if you're getting zero tax dollars on it anyway. We're not taking viable commercial space away from the town. We're providing an alternative that provides more viable commercial space to the town by providing this option for entrepreneurs and small businesses to open a shop where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to.
Have you done this in other areas in Denver or Colorado?
I haven't. This will be the first one for me. Have you guys done any live work?
I'll need you to come to the podium if you're going to answer, though. I need you to come to the mic if you're going to answer, please.
We have put live work units in I think 3 different locations in Denver, but they're pretty new, and I don't know how they're performing in terms of live work.
To this kind of magnitude? I mean, we're talking 50% of the commercial space?
No, it'd be a much smaller component of a larger project.
And why so big here versus like in the other projects? Why such a big ask? I think that's what I'm struggling with.
Yeah, generally, most of our clients are residential developers, or I should say most of our residential developer clients don't really want to put retail in because the funding sources, for retail are completely different. So, and as a result, it ends up being a very small piece of the pie, and sometimes the live work is their compromise position, if you will, to provide some commercial component and storefront and activity rather than a residential unit on the ground floor, which I don't think anyone really necessarily wants on Main Street.
And I'm guessing, correct me if I'm wrong, but those typical projects will be sort of the 250 to 400 unit range, and they'll have somewhere around 20,000 square feet of commercial space just because it's required by zoning. This is obviously a much different project from that typical space. This is a downtown urban core. We're kind of taking the risk on plugging in the full 70,000 square feet of the entire ground floor along Main Street of commercial. And that's why we have, obviously more of it proposed as live work as a backstop if the commercial doesn't successfully lease, which again, I think it's going to successfully lease. I think once we get this under construction, we're going to have a lot of activity here, and we're going to have great retailers. We already have discussions going with some really nice brands that are going to be awesome here. This is really just to be able to get the construction loan so that we can build the thing, because without it, we won't be able to.
Commissioner Ritchie.
Couple questions. I guess this is for our attorney. Most codes I've worked with don't allow use variances. can we confirm that we actually have the authority to approve a use variance, or if this needs to be an amendment to the PD?
Yeah, I mean, that's something I can kind of look into. I mean, I think I'm trying to think of like functionally, I guess, if, because to me, this is kind of like a contingency kind of issue. So I'm wondering, I guess I'd have to look into how we'd kind of work this contingency into this application, whether it be associated with the associated agreement, or kind of how functionally that would work. And that's something I kind of want to look into.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
I just would,
Yeah.
a use thing typically doesn't come through as a variance request,
Yeah.
rather an amendment, at that degree.
Yeah.
And then I guess, my question for you might be, why build all 3 buildings right now then, if you're not confident in the market? You're phasing in other buildings later. Why don't you focus on, say, block, whatever, the one directly across the plaza, and bring the other 2 in later?
Yeah, so we want to build the whole, everything in red, basically as a single-phase construction project for a couple different reasons. It makes construction phasing and utility access a lot easier and makes sense. It also, if you build it as individual projects, sort of one year and then the next year you're paying mobilization costs and hiring a contractor over and over again, you lose a lot of efficiency that you gain by building it as a single project. And in a lot of regards, the driving force of this project is a 380 unit residential project that needs to operate as a single entity by a single manager and a single owner. Through construction, we will have some phasing. This Block 6 and Blocks 10 and 11 will deliver first, about 14 months after we start construction. From there, we'll move over to Block 9, which will deliver probably about 6 months later, as well as these northern buildings, and kind of working our way clockwise around here. So the entire construction phase is a 2-year duration. And we want to get it all built as a single phase, just from a management perspective and from a construction efficiencies perspective, which is why we need to, in order to do that, build these speculative ground floor spaces. I guess the alternative would be to build it slower over time. If the commercial didn't lease, you could potentially build more true residential at the ground floor. But I don't think that accomplishes anybody's goals any more than providing a nice 20-foot tall live-work space does. I think what we're proposing, even if it goes that route in the sort of downside scenario that some of it does turn live-work, you still have this really attractive, really vibrant, tall, commercial-looking Main Street, which to me is one of the most important pieces of the project, with some great small businesses. I mean, live-work doesn't have to be a sad thing. You can have some great entrepreneurs, some great small businesses. It can be an entrepreneur, or be an incubator for some of that space that I think Superior in particular is really, really thirsty for. So.
And realistically, I just wonder how you're going to manage that over time. If that first tenant comes in and sure, they want to open, a little office, right? How is your apartment manager, management company going to make sure that those, front portions stay activated and actually maintain a business in there? To me, it just feels like a slippery slope into residential use, which I agree, the architecture, right, adds something, but from the use perspective, it just feels like an operational, it doesn't feel realistic from an operational perspective that.
No, I mean, that would be a function of the leases for those units. You would be required to operate that front space as a business, and we can come up with some specific language around that. But certainly, it's not going to be someone's living room. And no one's going to want their living room with a 20-foot tall, 40-foot wide glass frontage on Main Street anyway.
Right, I agree. They would just put, big blinds up and shut it off.
We certainly won't allow any blinds. We will have signage requirements that govern the opacity of glass along Main Street, that you can only cover up to 10% of it with a graphic logo type of thing. No one, even commercial tenants, will be able to just put up black blockers or graphic blockers that block the glass, and that'll apply to the residential also. So regardless of whether it's live work or true commercial, you're going to have that visibility, that openness, and that kind of commercial feeling in perpetuity here.
Is the concept that the owner of the business and or his family actually lives on site?
Yeah.
Full time?
Yeah.
So I'd like to piggyback a little bit on what Lisa was saying and ask, in addition to the slippery slope that you're describing here, how much of a headache is it going to be for our town to provide certificates of occupancy for these places? I mean, is it a residence? Is it a business? How is that gonna work?
It gets permitted as a residence. It's building code wise, the work description is a residential use, and that's part of the reason why we don't find it compatible with what's, permitted by the PD. So, but like I said in my memo, I didn't really have a lot of detail on what's proposed here, and the separation, as I described, being a ground floor use versus something above. If that's a separation, that's a heck of a lot easier to manage and control than something that, they're showing spaces, and, we haven't had this for terribly long to look at in detail, but we also didn't have the background as to what we were actually looking at. So it's, I don't have an issue with this as a kind of a fallback option, but I do kind of at the scale that is being proposed. And we would need to work out a lot of details over how that actually gets controlled. So it sounds like, Morgan Ranch is taking responsibility for ensuring that the work piece is insured, but that's typically a land use responsibility, and I don't know how we would manage that, because that's not something that we've had to tackle before. So it's a difficult question to answer from you. Partly because I don't have any experience with it, and partly because I didn't have any background on what was actually being proposed or how it was proposed to be managed. So
we could put a restrictive covenant on the deed that requires that those front spaces, if used as live work, to be only work. We have no problem with making sure the work part of these uses remains functioning as work in perpetuity. So I really wouldn't worry about a slippery slope, and we can come up with some.
Work is also needs to be defined in terms of, we didn't envision downtown Superior to have ground floor offices, because that doesn't generate the same. I mean, and from a land use perspective, I'm not a retail sales tax guy. You have to talk to Paul Millis about, how that affects things, but it's just the activation of the use. People may come and go once or twice a day from an office use, like if there's some appointment or something like that. But if it's retail or if it's a restaurant, then you get that activity. And that's what, obviously I understand Bill's other end of the spectrum is that if it's vacant, you don't have any activity. So something's better than nothing. And I agree with that. It's just, I think the difficulty with this application is that, one, we're starting kind of from two different interpretations, and I'll get into how staff interprets that later. But it's just such a varied perspective. You either have 73,000 square feet of commercial, or you have 30, and I don't understand kind of why it's one extreme or the other and not something in between, and that's, I think, where we haven't had any dialogue yet. So.
And certainly it could end up somewhere in between. I don't think it will. I think if the commercial is successful, the commercial will be successful, and we won't have any live work. If the commercial is not successful, the commercial won't be successful, and we'll probably have close to the maximum live work. It's certainly conceivable you would end up with a situation where you have one block that develops as live work and the rest of it is successful commercial. I just, in sort of reality, I don't see that being the way that it works out. And I just, on the commercial and the office on the ground floor commercial is defined elsewhere in the PD. It does include office as an allowed use on that ground floor. So changing it to basically any commercial use in the front of those live work spaces, whether it's professional office or retail or whatever else is allowed within that commercial definition, doesn't change anything from a use standpoint. It's just adding that back half of the space that could be a residential unit and create some activity.
I think the one thing that I'm still struggling with is you're having trouble getting people to finance this deal because they're experts in it and saying retail isn't good right now for all the reasons. Well, for all the reasons you laid out at the beginning, you said for AWS, retail, we have open space all over. My concern is where's a project here in Colorado that has this much commercial space like this been built and successful in the last year or two? I mean, because I understand we talked about this 3 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, and that was the concept, but things have changed. And is it really doable to have commercial? I know you're excited about it, but when you can't get the businesses behind it to finance it, it kind of tells you something. They're the experts in doing this.
So there's sort of a two-pronged answer that, and I'll let Terry and the local guys talk about other successful retail areas. But the financing, and Terry started to talk about for mixed-use projects in particular, is tough because typically financing sources are either residential guys or mall guys. Yep. This is not a mall, and then we don't have the, we don't want it to be a mall, right? So we're not really looking at retail financing sources. We're looking at traditionally residential financing sources, which, to Terry's point, residential financing sources hate retail in every way, shape, and form, regardless of how the market is or what's happening, really. Because it's a different kind of use. It operates differently. They don't understand it. And that's a problem that we find on every mixed-use project I've ever dealt with. It takes a really strong financial sponsor to get these things done, because you have to bridge that gap of office sometimes and retail and residential and entertainment and bring them all together in a single package, and get a single group to finance that, which is why on this we've gotten that kind of feedback. We're working, because it's primarily a residential project, about 80%, even if the commercial is successful, about 80% of the revenue from the project comes from the residential uses. It's financed by residential sources, which are always going to be nervous about any retail use, which is why we need to provide some sort of flexibility to prove to them, hey, even if you're right and the retail world falls apart, which again I think is overblown. I don't think retail Armageddon is real, especially in a market as strong as this with the demographics that you have here. But even if you're right, we have an answer for you, and the project won't die. And that's what this is.
But then you're going back and kind of arguing against yourself, because now you're saying the concept plan hasn't changed. It's always been this, and it's been a residential retail, and we knew this from the beginning that it was going to be difficult, but we agreed to this plan of commercial residential, even though you said, as long as you can remember, residential doesn't like to do retail like this.
Mm-hmm. No, mixed-use projects are tough to finance, and that's part of. I mean, that's just the truth of the
Well,
matter.
I get it, but why 2 years or 3 years ago did we agree to this type of, to what we agreed to? That's what I'm trying to, because we want to change it now. Now I'm just trying to understand what's
no, sure,
to change it this significantly.
Sure.
To Stephen's point, I think what at least I struggle with is going from 78 to 30. It's not just a little. You're not just asking for a 10% or 20. You're asking for more than a 50% change, and that's really that's major.
With time limits, and only if it's only if it's in both of our best interests, really. Because you don't want empty commercial space forever. You don't. It would be bad for everything around here. You don't want it. I don't want it either, both from a design standpoint and a financing standpoint. So this is coming up with timeline restrictions, and only subject to it obviously being in our both interests. If it hasn't leased in 3 years, it's going to be in our best interest to figure something out. We're proposing a solution to solve that. I think to your question on why this wasn't part of the PD in 2013, I think there is and was a strong desire for this to be a commercial corridor and a commercial project that generates tax dollars for the town, that generates this really active, walkable urban neighborhood. We still have that same desire. But I'm sure, I don't know if this came up, I wasn't here in 2013, but if it did, I'm sure there was strong pushback to having a lot of residential on Main Street for all those reasons, because we all want it to be this commercial, cool Main Street. We don't want it to be a traditional residential project with ground floor stoops facing the Main Street. What they didn't have for the benefit of the planning at the time was a really serious vertical developer who was ready to finance this project and do all the design work and everything that we've done to date. And it turns out that with this project and with the capital stack that we have, this is just a serious concern, and we can't finance it without this concession. And like I said at the beginning, I understand that this is a big ask, and I wouldn't be doing it if there was any other way to get it financed. And I really don't think we're going to end up here, but I do need to have an answer for our partners who are going to give me lots of money to build this. In order to satisfy those concerns. And so I'm trying to come up, and that's what we've done with the time limits and design of the retail space and leaving those storefronts the way they are. I'm trying to come up with a solution that works for our partners and is also, automatically in the town's best interest.
So the reduction that you're asking for is concrete. It's not something that, 50,000, like a reduction from 73 to 50,000 or to 45,000 or something like that. Is that palatable, or does it have to be all the way down to the 29,000 square feet.
I have a downside scenario pro forma that we've shared with our bank partners that shows, what happens if none of the commercial space ever leases. Those end spaces that are in white just stay vacant, which again is not realistic. We would lease it at some rate, but if they just stay vacant and we turn the rest of these into live work, and that's basically at the minimum threshold that we need to be at to make the numbers work, which is why we've done it where we've done it. So it kind of needs to be the specific square footage that's in here. There's a lot of work behind this. Is all I'm saying.
Well, and I think there's probably a lot of questions around the details, and I don't know if you have more presentation or if we can just keep talking about this.
I'd like to give Remington a chance to just talk about the townhomes at the south end of the project before we kind of wrap up the.
Because we're going to have we're going to have question time. I think we're all very interested in this, and I think there are all kinds of scenarios we'd like to talk through. That might not happen tonight, but.
Or do you guys need him?
Chase can probably go tonight.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry to keep you so long. But if you want to finish the presentation tonight, it's about 9:20. Let's see where that goes. Finishing up the presentation, if we want to take some time and ask some questions. I imagine this will probably go into next Tuesday, and I'd love to be able to provide them some guidance. I don't want to just come back and keep talking about this next week, but they probably have some work to do and questions to ask and be able to come back to us with some answers. So go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to introduce Guillaume and Steve from Remington Homes. As you know, Remington's been a great partner of Downtown Superior in general. They've got a lot of nice product down on blocks 13, 25, and then moving down to 26 and 27. As part of this Morgan Ranch proposal, we dedicated the south half or the south edges of blocks 9, 10, and 11 to additional for sale townhome product. Couple of reasons for that. One being to keep the rental product size at 380, which you don't really want to get too much more than that, just be able to manage it effectively and finance it effectively. And also to provide a nice transition from the urban Main Street project with commercial down into the existing residential neighborhoods. And so they've designed a new product for this that I think really effectively transitions from Main Street down into the existing residential neighborhoods. And I'm really happy to be continuing work with them. So go through
if we can give Chase a chance to get out as he comes up, that would be awesome. Thanks. Introduce yourself.
I will need Stephen to put our little presentation up. We got just a couple slides.
Oh, you bet.
So,
okay.
Is this it? Did you already go through? So Steve Knoll, Remington Homes. I also want to, kind of reiterate, we're excited to be here too. Block 13 was our first adventure in downtown Superior, and we're moving on to block 25, and we got 26 and 27 also in the planning stage. Also, so 9, 10, and 11 are kind of an extension of what we've been doing down here. These are row homes, but they're real similar to the townhouses that we built. Let's see. And so just want to make sure everybody introduce Remington to everybody. If you guys aren't real familiar with us, we're a local builder. We've been building houses in the Denver metro area, primarily on the west side of town, for about 50 years now. And the red dots are kind of some of our more major projects that we've done over the years. We like building houses that energy efficient. All of our houses that we build are E-Star tested with the HERS rating. And as you can see, the typical house gets about 130 on the HERS index. Code is somewhere around 100 right now. And all the houses we build range somewhere between the 50 and the 60 on the HERS rating. So it's like your golf score. The lower, the better. We also have embarked on the Indoor Air Plus program to to help build healthier houses. And so we've started doing that, and we're real proud of all the work that we've been doing on this. And so here's our project. We are building in blocks 9, 10, and 11, which are highlighted in the green here. There are 3 buildings in 11, 3 buildings in 10, and there will actually be 4 buildings in block 9, one of them, which is that interior building that does not face the street, which we will need to get a variance for that. All the other ones have their front doors facing the public streets. This is, again, just kind of the same overview. We've been looking at this a lot tonight, so I'm just going to go through this pretty quick. This is block 9. Actually, I think that's block 10, isn't it? Is that 11? Sorry, block 11.
Showing us block 10.
That's
your
block
key map on the top.
Okay, yeah, block 10. And then this is block 9 with the 4 buildings and the one facing the interior on this one. The style of these row homes that we're building are similar to what we built in block 13 and are starting to build in block 25, which have a two-car garage on the first floor with the entry and either a study or a bedroom. Most of them will have a bedroom at the bathroom down there. This particular product did allow for a little bit of a wider unit on some of the end units of the building, which we will be building a little bit wider. The other interesting factor on these, since we will be building these about the same time as block 25, we also are introducing a rooftop deck that I think we've had a lot of conversations with over the years that we've put on our single family. So we're going to be introducing that on the townhouses here, which we have not built that on the townhouses before. Am I going backwards? So this is just a couple different footprints that we have going on here on the 3 blocks that we're looking at. This is our criteria here that we're meeting. The only exception, so all of our height limits and our setbacks are all within the PD requirements. One of the few exceptions that we'll be asking for is our square footages of the houses do bump up over the row home typology by about, I think it's about 200 square feet. I'll need to look that back up. I'm sorry, that number escapes me just a little bit. So that'll be another exception we'll be asking for on that. The 3-story building is approximately, again, I can't quite read it. It's 39 feet high with our 4-story with the rooftop deck. It's not really a 4-story building. Oh, thank you. That's still not. It's not really a 4-story building. It's just a rooftop deck. So all we'll have the stair access going up for it. Our single-family houses, we had some living space up there. That will not be the case on these townhouses. It'll just be kind of the stair access going up to the rooftop deck that we're going to be offering. So really won't have any interior 4th floor living. So it's not really good. It's more accurate to call these a rooftop deck that we'll be looking at on these. This just kind of shows the typical, so we'll be building the 103 plan, which was real similar to our block 13 footprint. We are changing the elevations up to kind of match more modern downtown style versus the architecture that we built on block 13. And then that 109 plan is the little bit wider plan that we'll be building on some of the end units over there. So this architecture here, this shows the 3-story without the rooftop, so it gets a normal roof on top of it. And you can see the rear of the building with the 2-car garage in the front with a small porch and essentially either a bedroom or a study on the main level with a deck and the main living area on the 2nd floor. Again, the deck will face the street, real similar to how in block 13 the decks either would face the courtyard, and we do in block 25 have some of these decks that face old railway, so we'll have some of this across the street facing the same direction. I just wanted to point out, we are putting four-sided architecture on this, so we're carrying all of the architectural elements that are on the front and the back around to the sides of the building. And then this is the architecture when it goes to the rooftop deck, and what you're looking at on the, essentially the top there is the stair shaft coming up onto the roof, and that is set back from the front of the building and from the back of the building. So in this particular case, we don't have any, four-story elements. That's the shaft itself is set back.
Are you indicating that you'll have entire blocks with rooftop deck, or is there some stipulation of, there'd be one or two, or?
There is no stipulation on that. However, I do believe that we'll either build the entire building with the rooftop or the entire building without the rooftop.
Why would people not want the rooftop? Is it likely that, what's more likely that's going to happen?
It's probably more likely, again, if we take our experience from our single family, we have about, I think it's about a 70% take rate on the rooftop deck. So, if we bounce back and forth and actually build some buildings without the rooftop and some with, I can imagine it'd be about a 70-30 mix of some of those. The reason why we wouldn't build the rooftop deck is it is quite a bit more expensive to build it. And so I think it will be a little bit of a market-driven function.
So would that be a full rooftop deck? So you could, if you live on the end unit, you could walk all the way to the opposite end? Or
no,
how's the division?
Yeah, there's privacy walls, we'll call them, in between that you'll build up. And we're showing these in here. They're about a 4-foot tall wall on some of these, but we're also using that shaft as helping separate in between each one of the units. So in the case where the stair comes up, that's actually probably an 8-foot tall wall that backs to one another. So you won't be able to just kind of hop down the line, so to speak.
Yeah, and we're within our height elevations with these. Okay.
Yeah, so the roof, these are 44 feet tall, and per the PD, we're allowed to go up to 55 foot. And again, this just illustrates the four-sided architecture. You can kind of see on the left-hand elevation there that the rooftop deck is going to occupy the back half of the roof, and we still have a little bit small of a roof structure on the front side of it, and you can see where the stair wall is going to come up. That'll help give some division between your neighbor on that. And this is one of our color schemes and one of our renderings that we got, just showing kind of how this will look running down Old Railway on this. So we will be using some stuccato, or it's a stucco board, and we'll be using stone, and the cement siding will be the predominant textures that we'll be using on the building.
Will the entire block be the same style and colors and everything? Or?
No, we'll have a couple different color schemes. This is just the one that was done for the rendering.
Okay.
So we'll develop some additional color schemes to kind of, it'll all intermix.
Do we have requirements in there for that? Are they?
We should have all the color schemes as part of the application, and we don't.
Okay.
And I believe that's all I had. So if we had any questions or.
Nope.
Thank you.
So that wraps up our presentation. I do have some responses to some of the things Stephen brought up, but maybe it's better to let you ask questions and I can just respond to them as a team. I don't know. You can tell me how you'd like to.
Sure. So we're at 9:30. Let me just do a check-in as I promised I would do. I was up at 5 this morning for a 6 o'clock install, and I know Lisa was up pretty early as well. So I don't know how late we want to go, but let me just get some feedback from the commission. You guys want to ask a few questions? We good till 10?
I'm good for a little bit, but I don't know where we're going to.
Okay. Why don't we plan to just go till 10? I think I'd like to get, I think the focus here needs to be there. there are a lot of things missing from these plans that we need to, I mean, my goal would be, I mean, I don't want to pass this on to the board. It's like it's half-baked, right? I mean, there's just a lot of pieces missing. So if our discussion could be around, you know, yeah, just how do we get these answered, and what do we want them to come back and answer, so that, and come back next Tuesday with something we feel like we can move forward to the board, because I'm not comfortable passing something along to the board that's not ready, right? So that's kind of, I feel like, our responsibility and our goal to get that done. So I think Stephen could probably help guide a lot of that for us as we move through this. But if there's, if we want to take 5 or 10 minutes, if you've got some questions that, you know, are outside of Stephen's request, then we can take a few minutes to do that. Otherwise, we can.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like there's a lot of issues that, you know, easement language that is necessary, you know, understanding the variance and how this would operate over time, that until the applicant and staff, I think, is on the same page with a lot of those items, I feel like there's too many things left on the table at this point in time for us to be worried about, you know, everything, and I feel like there's just too many things that need to be ironed out. Half-baked is exactly the word I was going to use. I have some concern on the architecture on some of these buildings. I wanted to go through that just generally. I think the amount of stucco on the kind of the large building in the center, I don't remember what block it is.
Yeah, those are things that we usually have an opportunity to talk about, but there's so many things missing.
So many things at this
getting
point.
Into some of the details is, I mean, we'd like time to do that too. So, is that, Anthony, do you?
I think because of the scale of this, I also would like more time. I think that, you know, this has been a pretty good, really good presentation tonight. Yep. And I'm a lot closer to feeling like I can make a decision on this, but I'm not quite there either. You know, there's some questions that I have that I'd like to, you know, just review. And then I'd also like to have an opportunity to hear from Alex, who's here, and, you know, get an understanding of the studies and the impacts of traffic and some of the other internal structures that are in place that, you know, we need to have answers for.
I think some of that might have to be next week. I'd really like this to come back next week with, well, a little better baked than it is today. And Stephen, I mean, would it make sense to just go through the things that we've got to get squared away? I mean, you know, there's parking, there's the even more clarity around the definition of this live work variance desire. I mean, there's so many little details that I know we probably aren't going to be able to get out today, but you know, everything from, you know, like you said, is this hard? You've come 18 months, you know, when does the 18 months start? On what building does it start? Is it a hard fixed percentage? Is it vary? All those types of things I'm hoping you can discuss over the next week and get nailed down a little better. The land use issue about can we even do this, right? I mean, legally, does this require PD change? That's got to be researched and figured out, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll certainly look into that a little further. I think one of the issues I had was like I said, the contingency kind of issue and how that would be kind of enforceable and how we would kind of work that into the application. I think kind of functionally, the applicant would have to kind of pick one or the other, you know, rather than kind of have that contingency of, you know, if I can't rent commercial, then it will go to live work. I think for purposes of the application, it has to be either live work, you know, with that specific percentage, or commercial. So just to kind of, I guess, clarify that particular point.
Yeah.
But certainly I can look a little further into.
Because I'm sure we all have varying opinions on what that might look like and some understanding about what the market's doing, but yeah.
There was one general area that Steve and Bill were opposite sides about that I'd like to understand, which is Steve is pointing out, has been pointing out, that we typically have easements over all public areas.
Right.
And Morgan Ranch apparently doesn't want to give us easements. And I would like to know why.
Well, is that really, and I don't know if that's a true statement. I know it's not in the application. They haven't
I'd
really
like to
spoken
address
to that yet.
before
So,
we-
yeah.
That is I think a big point, and I would like to address it before we
Sure,
wrap
you-
up
you
here.
can-
So now we're.
Yeah, that is a biggie. Go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So, Stephen pointed out that this is different from all of our other applications, and that's because it is different from all of our other applications. All of the other applications to date have been for sale townhomes. The common areas in those for sale townhome blocks operate traditionally as an HOA would manage those areas and maintain them and own them. We don't have an HOA here, and so the Metro District owns those spaces, and they're for the common benefit of the public. So the courtyards, for example, in the middle of Block 13, service all of those individual residential owners. They're owned, dedicated to, and owned by the Metropolitan District, and the Metropolitan District maintains them. This project is a commercial for rent project that operates as a single private entity. And that's a very different structure from the traditional way. So any normal apartment complex that you go to is going to own most, if not all, of the area around it. It's not strictly public space. It's owned privately. We're buying it as private property, and it's maintained as private property. The Metro District won't have to pay to cut the grass and sweep the snow. We will as a private property owner and apartment manager. So the areas, for example, the parking areas, certainly, these parking areas, the surface parking areas, provide the necessary dedicated parking for the residents there. They're not public spaces. They're not even shared. They're just for residential use, and they're private. This is private land that will be owned and maintained by the apartment owner. Same thing with some of these smaller pedestrian areas, like the one through the middle of the north half of Block 7, as well as some of the area behind the private property boundary will be owned and maintained by the private property owner. And that's really for the benefit of the Metro District in a lot of ways. The Metro District already has an operations deficit. It has too many costs and not enough tax revenue. And so if we were to dedicate more of this area to the Metro District, it would just further impede the Metro District and create additional costs for the Metro District to burden, which we don't want to do. We have provided, so that via per the original PD, parcel K, which is the plaza and the promenade, are going to be dedicated to the Metro District. So those will be public use, public access, owned by the Metro District, maintained by the Metro District. In response to Stephen's comment, asking for more public connection through the site, we did decide to dedicate, or at least provide, a public access easement over this larger pedestrian way to the north of Building 6 here, which sort of completes this cross through those larger super blocks. But again, these blocks have been platted for a long time as private developable area. And so there's no obligation to provide true public access easements through there. Now, we will have just, as a course of sort of in real life, it's not going to be gated. It's going to be open, and, public will certainly end up walking through there. But we don't want to provide a specific easement, because then that opens us up for potential liability, trip and fall, all of that. We're not a Metro District. We don't want to maintain this area as a technically public access easement, because it's part of the private apartment project. This has a lot of apartments that face right out onto it, and we need to be able to control and maintain that. The same goes for these parking areas here and here. On these blocks, the parking around these center green courts, again, serves the residential uses in these buildings, and those will be reserved private spaces for residents only. We're considering opening those for some shared use potentially during the day. That's going to be kind of as the project develops and operates, where we see some efficiencies. We'll keep working on that, but we need to be able to control it. Same thing goes for these spaces behind here. All these spaces behind these buildings are intended to be shared use that service really the retail uses in these buildings. And so those are open to public, because the public will be coming and visiting these retail uses. But the retailers are going to demand that they have some convenient, accessible parking that they know we can control, that isn't owned and operated by the town or Metro District or anybody else. And that's the same answer for this parking field here. These retailers on the plaza, because they're so far off of Main Street, they're going to be really concerned with having accessible and convenient parking to serve their business. And that's what this parking lot does. So again,
why no public access easements in those areas?
No.
Why?
because we need to be able to control them. They're private property.
How do you park
owned by
there
the
then?
retail.
How can I go and park
Well,
there if I'm
like you park at 29th Street Mall or any other retail center.
But isn't like our marketplace the same way? Isn't that privately owned? And
It's got public access easements through all of it.
Not across all the parking spaces.
I
I'm
have to
sure.
double check, but it's got public access easements through it.
So certainly through it. And I have no problem providing a public access easement through this alleyway as long as it doesn't cover any of the parking spaces. We just need to be able to control the parking, the actual parking
Control
spaces.
the parking with signage.
No, exactly, but we can't if we give up ownership to it. If we give you a public access easement over it, that means anyone can park there all the time, no matter what, and we can't put any time restrictions on it or do anything else.
You just haven't given me anything in lieu or an explanation as to why.
And I apologize for that, we will work on the narrative, but that's the reason. It's because it's important to the leasability of these retail spaces.
can we look at other areas, and can you look at the other areas in
Again,
town
I
that we
have a
have and
point to
just
start with.
confirm?
I have nothing to respond to until I have
Yeah,
something to
right,
start with.
sure, okay, all right, fair enough, okay.
But the idea, this is all private property, we're buying it and paying a lot of money for it.
So you can articulate, you can get this articulated so we can respond to it?
Yeah, and I think we should work on a color plan that shows the uses of parking, as well as highlighting any public access mechanisms that we are.
It just sounds like it's different than anything we might be doing in town, so yeah. And
I would guess most of your retail centers privately own their parking. The grocery store down here, I mean, that usually is privately owned, accessible to the public because businesses want people to come park and use their businesses, but privately owned and maintained.
So what you're really looking for is whatever, something similar to what's being done in any of these other private developments. That's the goal, how it gets communicated and
It's the
written.
goal, but the shared parking versus residential parking analysis shows that 75% of that parking in that area is reserved for residential. So Bill's suggesting that he's willing to explore in the future a more shared parking environment, but that's not what's proposed in the FDP.
Okay.
Well, so the FDP proposes, what we intend to propose, that even these, like this area, would be privately owned, shared parking that we'll sign it and control it so that it's usable by the public to access these retail uses, but also usable for residential guests for overnight and that kind of thing. That's what the shared parking does, is uses the same amount of parking spaces for multiple uses.
Is that intent okay? I mean, I know it's not written, but I mean, listening to him say it, is that?
It'd be easier to respond to it. I had it actually fully explained and actually had time to think about. But I mean, I don't know.
I know that's not good enough. I'm more of just making sure when he puts this together, it's the intent that we just heard in this meeting, right? That
it's
that's
something. I mean, we can continue to have dialogue about it, but and shared's not defined anywhere. So I mean, it's assumed as public, but without an access easement or something in lieu of an access easement, I have no confidence that it's actually public parking.
Okay. You guys will work on that this week?
We'll work on some narrative language. I mean, the shared parking study, I think, does a decent job of describing that, but we can certainly come up with some plans that graphically illustrate it better and work it into the actual body of the narrative a little bit better to try to make that.
So the point in the presentation is that the only parking that the town controls is the on-street parking. Everything else would be by the Morgan Ranch, evidently, because it's private development. It's not even owned by the Metro District. So it's a totally different proposal than anything we've considered, and we don't have any detail on it.
Okay.
And that's by design, because this is a private retail and multifamily residential project. It needs to be able to control its parking. It's not, there shouldn't be it shouldn't all be public parking.
I don't think I'm not in a position to disagree with what I'm hearing. I don't know about the others, but I mean, I get it. Costco, Target, they don't want that open to, people parking in there for non-related uses, right? So I think that's the intent.
The trick with this one is that the whole area is proposed as a shared kind of parking area. They're proposing, to aggregate all of their parking there, 1,067 parking spaces, and then they reserve some for residential, and then some is actually shared. But the details of where that's shared, most of it's in the garage, some of it's here, small portions of it are on. I just don't think it's explicit. And then I don't know any information as to how it's controlled or how it's signed or how it'll be regulated by somebody that's not. If it was all the town, we could figure it out later, but it's not. So.
Well, and a lot of that's market driven as the retail owner trying to lease retail space we're going to have lease obligations to maintain a certain amount of parking available for those retail uses.
So I think it needs to be defined. I think we're asking for definition so we can respond. I think that's.
The definition is as proposed in the
written.
FDP, it's private parking, and I think Stephen doesn't like that.
No,
But
it's not that I don't like it. So, I mean, one of the things is, they're unbundling their parking from their residential. So they're going to have a certain amount of reserved residential parking that gets leased separately. I don't have an answer as to whether or not, how a unit that actually has a car is obligated to lease one of those spaces and not occupy a public parking space. That's a simple question that I don't have an answer to yet. So there's a lot of just nuances to this proposal that I think need clarification in terms of the parking. And Alex may understand it better, but I've asked the questions, I haven't got the answers, so.
Well, and honestly, the intent of having it be private parking that we can control is that often does evolve over time. As you open the center, you have uses. There may be areas that, right now we're just calling this flexible shared parking field. If we have a bunch of residential people who are leaving their cars in here, we're going to have to put 2-hour signage on that or some kind of a permit system or something else. The point is that we own all of the retail space that we need to be active and successful and operate well, and we own all the residential space that we need to be active and successful and operate well. And we're going to do our job to make sure that all of the parking controls throughout the site function the way that they're supposed to, so that on aggregate, all of the parking in this round boundary via shared use and shared analysis that Walker Parking has done, and I will have them come to do a presentation next time if you'd like.
Yeah, if we can get that articulated and communicated so we can respond to it, let's do that. Let's try to move on to some, we know that's something that's got to be dealt with.
Just one other thing on that, quickly. Is this going to be pay to park? Is that part of the issue there?
That's not the plan, but as private parking, it could
It's not under our control. He's suggesting it's private.
Well, but it is a question that I think might be part of the issue if it is pay to park. I mean, that's what
I think the answer is if he wants to make it pay to park 3 years from now after this application is done, that's his business. So yes, the answer is yes, he could make that pay to, I think I'm responding correctly, right? I mean, I don't think that's intent, but if he wants to change it to pay to park.
Even right now, the Metro District owns this.
He's allowed to do that based on what he's presenting to us today. I don't know that that's what's going to get passed, but that's what
Thank you. That's my question. Is it,
So.
is it currently going to be pay to park? And I think the answer to that is no. At this
No, there's no
point.
intent to make it pay to park. And that's from, again, market driven. If we made it pay to park, nobody would come to the retailers. The retailer would go out of business and we'd be in trouble. So we're going to provide convenient parking that meets the market.
Yeah, but more importantly, you'll be able to do what you want.
If in 50 years the area develops and sky rises are everywhere and it's downtown Denver, we very well may start charging to park because.
But you do have an intent for some of the residential to lease a parking spot that's assigned to them.
Yep.
That is a current intent.
Yeah, which is a pay to park, right? That's a.
For the residential uses, yes. So yes, we are planning to charge for parking for residential uses, not for commercial or flex uses. We are planning on dedicating the public portion of this garage, which is a defined area of approximately 200 spaces, to the Metro District. So like this garage over here, the Metro District would also own and operate that garage, which does dedicate those 200 spaces for true public use via the Metro District ownership. So we can also clarify that in our.
Is that in the application or not clear? Okay. So we'll just, let's just get the stuff clear so we can respond to it. All right.
I've got one question, and this is just more of a comment. On the, where we open up into the square, the public square there, or whatever we call it, the triangle, you have the leasing center for the building on that corner that seems like it's the premier place looking out onto the square, and it's the leasing center. And it just seems like, it just seems weird that if that's the focal place of where we're going, that the leasing center is on that corner.
Yeah. Can you bring up the other presentation, our presentation? No, and you're right. That is an important corner, and that's why the leasing center and residential amenity is located there. That really acts as the hub of the whole project. That area here. This door is going to have a lot of active use from all the residents in the whole project coming into this building, coming upstairs and using the pool deck, fitness amenity, and other shared amenities that service the entire project. So this really operates as a commercial use, as a professional business office, and as amenities for the residents here. There's a co-working space on the ground floor. There's a fitness space on the upper floor with Peloton bikes that'll face off onto this plaza. So you'll have constant activity up there, and that's the whole point, is getting people into this space, getting people looking down at the plaza and creating activity. And from a commercial standpoint for the residential project, it's incredibly important that the leasing center and leasing office be at a main corner where it's got a lot of visibility. So it's important to us to have this at this corner where you're right on Main Street. You have some convenient parking here and inside the shared parking structure. And that's completely on purpose. And we think it does a really nice job of kind of bookending the building with the private commercial use here and the civic space here that kind of drags you down the promenade and maintaining that 3-story open glass height on this whole side of the plaza that really is going to be a lantern. Those lights are always going to be on. It's always going to be activating that edge of the plaza. So that's all very much on purpose.
And that's not a magnet for, I mean, I think about that and I say, isn't that a magnet for a bar or something that opens onto that space? Again, it's your guys, I mean, it's just an observation. It just doesn't make sense to me, so.
No, we have a lot of great corners. Honestly, I'll tell you, the first retail spaces the lease will probably be this one and this one at the front corners as you come into the project. We do have a lot of interest in this block 4, which is standalone pad. All these buildings have great corners that KTGY has built those little recesses into that really respect the corner. You know, in general, all these corners are going to be the most attractive spaces to lease, including that one and this little plaza here. So we've got a lot of great retail spaces, and we need to maintain a great location for the main hub of this residential project also.
So I have a quick question going back to public versus private space. Along the promenade, you mentioned that the bump out of the buildings giving a 10-foot, what was it, a 10-foot property line for fire code reasons. Yeah, that slide. I think you mentioned it as a fire code issue is why you were looking for that 10 feet. Is that correct? And I'd like a little more explanation on that. And you don't have to give it tonight, but you know, if you need.
That's part of it. In general, for fire code, if your building's within 10 feet of a property line, you have a limited percentage of openings on the building because they're worried about fire spreading from building to building. Whereas if you have that property line 10 feet away at least, now you're allowed to do nice big windows and everything that we would like to see in these residential units. If you have anywhere, if you have a property line within 10 feet, as it gets closer and closer, your percentage goes down. So if you're within 5 feet, you can only have like 20% of the wall as openings unless they're fire rated, which is not feasible. So that's the fire code issue. Honestly, that's not the driving issue here. The driving issue is really creating a privately owned space here that you can start to use this space as patios and entry decks and this really nice ground floor interactive space that people can use. If this was just right of way from building face to building face, you know, you could have open space and you could have some trees in here like there are, but you wouldn't have those patios and you wouldn't have that sort of semi-private usage. So I think you'd have overall less activation of that space on the ground floor than you do under this scenario. So what we've done is tried to create, you know, by maintaining the same building separation and actually increasing it. I think Jim, you said it's 49 feet building to building, which is 4 feet wider than the PD required. So same kind of physical building orientation as you would have seen under the PD requirement. We're just providing opportunities for more of that residential activity to spill out those front doors and have some patio furniture and umbrellas and things down here that you wouldn't be able to have on a right of way.
Okay, I'm going to put a pause because we're coming up on 10 o'clock. We've not provided direction. I want to get focused on the things that we need to get addressed for next week. I promise every question you have, every concern you have, we'll have plenty of time to talk about that. Minus Ben, who won't be able to be here. But so let's get focused on giving him direction of what we want addressed. I think that's more Stephen than us, and that we might need to provide some feedback based on it. But can we take that approach and let Stephen articulate the things that are missing? If we need to respond to it, that's great. I don't want to get into 10-minute explanations or questions about why this today. We can do that next week, but let's give them some feedback so when they come back next week, we can wrap this thing up hopefully in 2, 3, or 4 hours.
Well, I guess my comment would just be, there's so many items outstanding on this, how much time, this is a massive application, and we really appreciate all of this effort coming forth at once. It's really helpful to see this all together and how it all relates and how it works. So I think there's positives to that. The flip side is there's so many loose ends on this thing, we will never get through this until it's tight. How much time do you think you need to get Stephen's concerns addressed, to get these questions answered, and come back to us with something that's
Well, the better question is,
pretty ready
do
to
you
go?
know what those questions, I mean, there's a staff report that I think if you read, I've highlighted the crap out of it because, I mean, if you read that staff report, I think I think you'll see all the questions, right? I think, Steve,
Yeah.
Is that fair? I mean, and you summarized it at the end. I mean, I can, hit the summary stuff here at the end if
No,
in
that's
the
fine.
meeting, but I think you can read
If
it.
the staff report is all the loose ends we're at, we
I
can certainly.
think those are,
Yeah.
you've got all the loose ends in there. Is that fair?
I believe so, yes.
I mean, we may
It's a
have
matter,
some
I mean,
other
but
things,
some of
but I
that's
think, yeah,
what you guys feel
There's
needs
some
more direction,
There's some direction that I don't know that we're going to get. I mean, there's too many other loose ends to even go into, even to be able to talk about why you have a concern about.
No, we haven't got to that. We did a first cut at this. So, I mean, and that's how the
Yeah,
presentation
and-
was set up, and we can get into the architecture and those elements and I can prepare a presentation to kind of cover those elements, but, and we can work with the applicant, but I mean, the question on timing is more about how long the applicant, needs to, and I don't know how familiar.
Yeah, I mean, I know there's a desire to get this moved. We have a couple of town board meetings that we're targeting for this. One is next Tuesday, but that's going to, or not
No,
next,
it's
but
the
the Tuesday,
18th, yeah.
the 18th, yeah. And then the next one was what, December? I forget what the other possible
December
meeting
9th.
was. Yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know if we'll get through it or not. We'll just have to see. Again, I'm not comfortable sending that.
I'm pretty confident we can come up with at least a narrative response to all of the issues raised in the staff report by the end of this week. Rachel's giving me a funny face, but we'll do it.
I mean, and I guess you need,
That gives staff time to
but yeah,
review.
staff needs time to,
I mean, we can discuss it at the meeting. I mean, I don't know when I'll get it and I think it's a little different than the toll application in the sense that I think some of the staff did a lot of legwork between those two meetings. But part of that was because, we were the ones requiring a road and it was an offsite improvement that the town wanted. And, so this is an element that's, I think more coming from the applicant. And, I think, staff will, need to provide some analysis if I get it in time. But otherwise, I'm familiar with the application. We can discuss it through the meeting if we need to keep it going. It is not as easy to, resolve these things through a public hearing process as it is if, we did it
right.
before. But I mean, so I really don't know how it's going to go. It's kind of territory. But we'll do what we can. And, our mandate is to try to keep this on track as well. I think that we need some assurance that, people can go to parking areas. And I think that, if you look at the PD, the connectivity issues are, big issues as to, I understand liability concerns, but you should be able to walk. I mean, so, to Bill's point, you may not be required to subdivide this lot, but he doesn't meet block length requirements. So typically you'd have some sort of street or something that actually goes through this parcel that provides you with that connectivity that we're not getting otherwise. An 8-foot wide sidewalk through here isn't a paseo. It doesn't change the orientation that this doesn't front the street. So it's not just one issue. It's kind of cumulative issues that encourage a certain type of development out here. And if we're not, I think that if we had the outlots and paseos and, connectivity, there's ways to get it. And one of them, and historically we've done it through easements. If that's not how they're going to propose it, then we need to address it some other way. But I don't think that kicking the can on, pedestrian connectivity in the core area of our downtown is something I'm going to get behind. So I don't know where we land with that, but we haven't had that conversation yet. So it makes it difficult.
I think we just need to encourage you to try to get us and Stephen. I mean, this is important, right? So let's figure this kind of stuff out and try to get it answered. And I
just want to preface this. I mean, some of these things that I'm hearing as loose ends, in my opinion, aren't loose ends. They're our proposal, which staff or you may not agree with. But from a commercial developer perspective, and there's a lot of reasons. I mean, Like I said, this is the culmination of a lot of years of experience.
But I think, I don't think it's a matter of agreement or disagreement. I'm hearing that there's not clear enough definition for us to agree or disagree, right? There's too many questions around what does it mean to reduce.
Well, where we've proposed it as private by not showing a public easement or plat, the town is asking for a public easement or plat.
Yeah, and if you guys talk this week and you're still no, then say no, and we'll just have to address, but we need to get it,
I mean, that's kind of the question. I mean, that's the direction. So staff has said that we feel like we need more connectivity. This is one of the things that Planning Commission needs to also
Sure, and we
weigh in
can,
on
that's probably a topic
you
for next
agree.
week. Maybe that doesn't get resolved, but there's, I mean, the legal ability for us to allow this live-work piece has got to be, we've got to get that figured out. Okay, Dan's going to have to figure that out. This percentage difference of, you know, what exactly does it mean? Does it mean if we sign this thing and in 18 months from some date, you know, they have the right now to just drop it down to 54%, or is there, that's drastic. I mean, I agree that's a big number, or is there some flexibility in that? Is it, and that's not really even the right word.
And the proposal.
I think more the thing is if we come back and you are able to fill retail space in 3 of those things, then what does the math do? Are you like picking it looks like you've identified clearly it's these that we want to be.
Yeah, this is the proposal that.
Okay, so if we lease 2 of those as commercial, then do you get to free up 2 more elsewhere? I mean, I think we want that really clear.
The proposal is that these spaces would be allowed to be live work. The blue spaces at any time pursuant to the PD, and the red spaces 18 months after.
If the commercial place moves out 5 years from now, does it get to go back to live work, right? I mean, that's probably another question.
Live work would be an allowed use after 18 months after the CO.
So, I'm sorry?
Live work in the red spaces would be an allowed use 18 months after this.
Even if you lease it as commercial?
Yeah, it's going to be an allowed use to the town attorney's.
Yeah, see, and we can discuss that next week, but if that's what it says, I mean, if it's that.
Yeah, to clarify, I mean, the one thing I want to make sure everyone's clear on is that, you know, basically the area in blue here, staff feels that the PD restricts to 25% residential or live work, because live work's a residential use. So Morgan Ranch is starting off well ahead of the curve, so to speak, because they're trying to say that they can have 100% of the area affected, like shown in blue, as live work.
So that's 75% of the total frontage, because the language
because of these things. But essentially, they're saying that live work's not residential. It's not subject to the 25%.
But if they feel like it's as defined as they want to make it be, then we'll just have that discussion next week. And I think they're hearing some concerns around that. And I guess I would encourage, I mean, if you've already had these, I got the impression there were a lot of things that were missing, and maybe it is that there's just, no, they're not missing, and it's the way it's going to be. If that's still the case after this week, then so be it. We'll discuss those next week. But let's find out about the legal implications of being able to even change land use.
I think one of the questions was, is there any flexibility? Is there any potential for dialogue? And kind of what I'm hearing is maybe no.
Well, well, I'm giving you a week to figure that out.
Right.
We have a week to figure that out. And if it.
But that wasn't answered beforehand.
No,
and, and what Dan's clarified is that we may not have an option to do an either or, maybe one proposal or the other. So you guys may need to get your head behind whether or not you're all right with all of this being live work versus it potentially being commercial.
Yeah, and that's a different discussion.
I can bring some numbers on the rents. You know, to me, this should only be approved in the event that it's automatically in the town and our best interest. So I'll illustrate why commercial is in our best interest. We're going to do our best to get commercial in there, and whatever kind of additional restrictions we need to add to this to make sure that that's the case, I'm happy to do.
And I think we all believe that. We just got to figure out what's going to happen in 5 years when you're in Hawaii and not here.
So the other thing that, I mean, merits some clarification is like the way that they're proposing to build this, as I understood Bill say it, is block 9 first. So if that gets built and then.
No, it's block 11 and 10.
It is block 11? Oh, no, never mind. So it's the actual reverse. So block 11 is going to be available first, and 18 months after that,
it could be live work.
Potentially for live work, whereas the town would prefer to see live work occur here, and this be the last thing that goes to live work. And so I don't know whether or not there's any flexibility.
And whether there's flexibility on the number of months
or whether or not like the Better City referral was, you know, recommended to do this in what he called tranches, where it was like 18 months for this, and then it would be 36 months. And then he actually said this isn't recommended on block 11. But, you know, effectively, it would be phases of, and we didn't even have a start time as to when that 18 months, so this meeting was the first clarification that it would occur after construction was completed, but per block. So, and then it depends on when they're phasing everything. So those are a lot of elements that at least that part we can get some understanding of. But I don't know, I mean, I don't know what we're gonna,
There
what we're
was
gonna find middle
discrepancy in
ground.
square footage too. You were running into some math problems. as
Well,
far as,
that's,
like-
yeah, I don't know, I can't make sense of the reduction. The reduction shows, you know, more retail square footage being lost than what goes into the live workspace. So I don't know.
You can help with that math, I'm sure, this week, get that math figured out. Okay.
Incorrect, or if I'm
Yeah.
misreading something,
Yeah.
but the numbers don't add up.
All right. So lots of communication this week, and let's see
We
where
can
we
go
are.
through the list, but it's gonna be.
I don't think that's, I think it's all written down, and I think if it's things that are technical that need to be figured out, that let's get those done. If they are, nope, this is the way we've done it, let's make sure that's clear next week so we can tell you what we think about it.
But one of the things that's very helpful to me is when Stephen does his, so if they don't get together and have this meeting, then having a meeting next week without having Stephen's analysis again.
Oh, agreed, yeah.
Right? I mean,
If this doesn't get done, that's a different
If the
question, yeah.
But he's got to have time, they've got to get it done and to him enough to get an analysis out to us so we can read it. Because it's exceptionally helpful to me to read what he
Agreed.
writes out.
Oh, agreed.
Right.
And so, Dan, to continue this, I mean, date certain would mean we'd have to meet next Tuesday, right?
Right.
And then there's another, what's that?
If we continue.
If we continue, and what's the other option? We continue,
Yeah, what would be to just, you could just make a motion.
I want to leave it open.
To continue, you know, to a future date that we had not determined, you know what I mean? I mean, you could just
But then
kind
you'd
of
have
make
to
it.
renotice it. We'd have to meet our notice requirements,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
maybe would be longer than
Yeah, so
what
I
the
mean,
meeting date might be.
yeah, it might functionally be a little easier to set it down for a specific date certain. You know, I don't know if within 1 week is you know.
So what
sufficient or
about, I
not.
mean, if they get a section of like, an important section completed, get it to you as soon as possible, not the entire, you know, all of your concerns, and do it and chunk it, you know, chunk something this week, and then we address that next week, plus all of our other little questions, and then whatever they can complete within the next 2 weeks, then 2 weeks from then, we have our meeting, and then we should be able to, and would that make sense, is to try to take a good chunk of it and then address all the smaller things next week during our meeting, if they're not able to get, does that make sense?
It does, it conflicts with the board meeting in terms of 2 weeks out from next
Yeah.
Tuesday would be a day after their board meeting.
so back to the question, when would you need to have how much time do you need to, I know, it depends on what the answers are. I mean, how much time you need to write up a summary for us, and
And it also depends on when you want the summary. So, I mean, it's just hard.
when we want it?
Yeah.
No, for our meeting next Tuesday.
Right.
If we wanted
I
it for our
usually
meeting
give that
next
to you on
Tuesday.
Friday. So I
When-
don't know if they would have till Thursday at the latest in order to give me something to turn around on Friday, but if you guys don't need it till Monday, then, you know, that's just,
Yeah,
and that's pretty fast, so.
it is. It's already Tuesday night, so.
Well, Monday's probably okay, right? If we got it.
Yes.
Given the,
This is a follow-up to
Yeah.
what we've already got.
yeah, so I would be okay with Monday. I don't know about everyone else, but.
Do we have to publish this 72 hours ahead of time, or is this because it's continued? Is that just the first agenda? 24 hours. 24 hours, we're good? Okay.
So by Monday night.
So Monday, yeah.
Works for me.
Yeah, I feel good with that, because I also feel some obligation and responsibility to get moving on this. You know, this is a project that we know that we want to have. There's some issues that are up, and part of the issue is that we haven't really, as a commission, had time to discuss this application at all. So I think a lot of the loose ends will be tied up with, you know, with some discussion and some understanding of what it is that we're looking for. So I'm comfortable with Monday and us coming back together on Tuesday, if that gives everyone time to do what they need to do.
Have never seen staff this concerned, so it just because of that, makes me concerned. There's just things we haven't dealt with before that we have to get addressed,
It's
so.
just unknowns. I mean,
It's just so many unknowns,
It's not
right?
that, I mean, it's not that I'm not behind the
It's very
project.
different,
Yeah.
right, than what we've done
It's just
before. And
questions
he
that haven't been answered.
self-admitted, it's a very different project than what we've ever had before, so.
I mean, I'm staff, so I don't get to get up.
I
and
know,
tell
you don't
that
have
I'm
10, there's
excited
not
about
10 of
the
you back
project.
there, right? Steven's a little uncomfortable with this.
But I am. I mean, this is
Make sure
it's a great project. you
Yeah,
know,
I know,
like,
agreed.
But I mean, it's also extremely important.
Yeah, I'm not sitting here in opposition to the project. I think there's just, yeah.
And I'm not either.
I
hope
don't
that
think any
everyone
of us are. It's
understands
just
that,
a
but
lot of
I need
unknowns. and-
clarification and to make a good recommendation to you guys.
Yeah.
So I'll move we continue to November 5th?
At 6 p.m.?
6 p.m. or 6, are we good all?
Is all good for 6 p.m.?
Okay.
Okay.
November 5th at 6 p.m.
Okay, I have a motion on the table and a second from Commissioner Harper, and all in favor. Anybody opposed? Nope, that's unanimous. So I don't close the public hearing, right? Leave it open, continued. And thank you, and see you next Tuesday. Thank you.